Hello, my friends. It is time for Krisis. Do not adjust your viewing port. It is I, Krisis, here live from New Zealand, and you are having me, a Krisis, here on your Sunday afternoon, for a very small portion of you, your Monday morning. But that's just for our New Zealand and Australia friends. And of course, the first question is, can you actually hear and see me? Always nice to confirm that before I start ranting and raving, or else the ranting and raving are just lost to the sands of time. So let me just confirm that you actually can see me, and then we're going to get right underway with our top 10 before I even do any hellos. So we're going to do a top 10. We're going to do some hellos. I'm going to have a moment of krisis, which I don't even know yet what it's going to be about. And then we are going to talk about so many comics that came out this week. I have confirmation that you have confirmation that you can see and hear me. So let us start talking about my top 10 comics of the week. Oh gosh, I forgot the banner. This is new process for me. Here we go. So this is not just my top 10 of the week. It's my whole top 10 of the year so far. It's only got one big change this week. Still repping for Ghost Box from Comixology by Mike Carey and Pablo Raimondi at number 10. Really love this series. Got an old Vertigo feel. Free for you if you have Amazon Prime. Absolute Superman. Jason Aaron doing Hope Corps, still hanging in at number 9. Then I have The Nice House by the Sea. It's my whole personality, and I love to talk about it every week. We have Dust to Dust, an outstanding Dust Bowl comic by J.G. Jones and Phil Bram. Really unlike anything else on the market right now. Then, I still haven't put the real cover in, but this is just fine because you can see how extraordinary the internal art is on Batman Dark Patterns by Dan Waters and Hayden Sherman. Love that they wrapped up a whole arc in 3 issues, and they're going to start a whole other arc. Really, probably the best Batman book on the stands right now. Then Jed McKay's Avengers, largely because of Farhad Karimi on art. Boy, do I love him. Number 4, Bug Wars by Jason Aaron. Last week talked about that. A perfect indie comic, goes big and has small personal moments, but new on the list this week, and my favorite comic of 2024, give or take a point or two. It's The Power Fantasy by Kieran Gillen, Caspar Wingard, and Clayton Cowles. And then at number 2, we have FML from Kelly Sue DeConnick, and still ruling at number 1, One World Under Doom. Okay. Well, now let's... Oh, and I put Crushing Krisis up there. Well, you know, this is why I need a producer, as we have established. I'm Krisis, and my website is crushingkrisis.com. And that was the top 10 of 2025 so far. But when I'm not here in front of you for this relatively brief period on a Monday or Sunday, depending on your location on the globe, I am mostly at crushingkrisis.com. I actually do new releases posts of all the upcoming new releases for the week following to talk about what I think will happen in them, but also to tell you where you could pick them up, and if there's a guide on Crushing Krisis where you can find the guide and how you can pick up that series. So it's actually, if you want to kind of play the home game version of this and follow along every week, that's what I do to kind of get myself organized for all of the polls every week. And of course, Patreon makes that world go round. Folks pledge just $1 or $2 a month. They get access to lots and lots of guides. If you pledge $22 a month, $2 a month, you get access to almost 100 guides that are not public right now, which is just wild that there are even that many to not be public, in addition to the 100 plus public guides. And that really helps keep the website running and keep all of this maniacal operation happening. So let's say hello to some folks, and then we got to decide what the Moment of Krisis is going to be about. I will say my computer's being a little herky-jerky today. I don't know that I could do anything about that. Like, I'm the things that are happening are the things that are happening. So we will see. Okay, so before the show, we had Bunk sharing that he also loves the Power Fantasy and correctly assumed that my top 10 would be Shaken Up. Super Panda saying that they love these streams. They don't get to watch all at once. And I was saying to Super Panda, I'm the same way for anything long like this because I really don't watch much screen media. Anything like a Dimension 20 D&D live play, I watch that in like 10-minute increments all throughout the week. So I'm totally cool if you are seeing this in little pieces. I actually am quite honored that you would make that much time and for you in my life. Max Appleman believes in me, and I believe in Max Appleman. On his channel, he posted one of my favorite early to mid Beatles songs, What You're Doing, in a 2-guitar arrangement this week. I believe his first 2-guitar arrangement for a Beatle Bop. So head over there, and you know what? All the channels I mentioned the most on the show, I made a little Friends of Crushing Krisis strip on my channel homepage. So now when you go to the channel homepage on YouTube, you can get easy links to all these folks that I talk about the most. But please go and watch Max's Beatle Bops. It's very cool. He does jazz guitar arrangements of his own of all of these Beatles songs that you surely know. And I really like it because now I've twisted his arm enough to start writing descriptions of them about how he's arranging them and like what the influences are, if it's like a certain jazz composer or player that you might be familiar with or that you might be interested in hearing more of. So I really, really love that Max is doing that project. Neil Pereira saying good morning, and I believe we confirmed last week that means Neil is in Australia. Good morning, Neil. Kenneth Crayley Jr., the most super of super fans of Superman and the Super Family. Hello to Kenneth. Bob Karlsik saying, Krisis, I don't know how I do it. Me neither, Bob, but I appreciate that you do. And Bob, I appreciate that you are here. Stephen Patterson saying, hey, everyone. Hello to Stephen. I got to do my vocal warm-ups. My lips, teeth, tip of the tongue, and the roof of the mouth. Lips, teeth, tip of the tongue, and the roof of the mouth. Lips, teeth, tip of the tongue, and the roof of the mouth. Okay, I might be qualified today. James Abel giving me the countdown, less than 15 minutes to go. Yeah, the hair and makeup team, the hair team, really, I think we're pretty efficient today. The makeup team, there might be some notes after the show. Says Murph, hello to you as well, and thank you for being here. Logan Wayne is here. Hello, King Krisis, ready to hear rate, rant, and rave. It's like shake, rattle, and roll. We're gonna rate, rant, and rave. You need one to have 2 syllables, though, about this week's comics. I don't even know what I'm gonna rave about yet. I'm still deciding. Captain Underpants still loading, but hopefully has made it all the way here today. Hank, time to end the week on a high note. Well, I'm so happy that I can be part of that weekend to you. Javier Hernandez saying hello. I've been looking forward to this all week. Me too. And I tried to get an early start on the reading this week, and still somehow it took me until 50 minutes before the show to complete the reading. It just expands to fill the time that there is. Like a highway, when you put more lanes, traffic fills more lanes. Studies have been shown to do that. So changing a 4-lane highway to a 5-lane highway, that you will have just as much traffic. That does not actually help. You have to change actual traffic patterns. And such is my comic reading that even if I give myself a whole extra day, somehow I will make it expand to take up enough time. And I know exactly why that happened this week, and we'll get to it on the talk through when we get there. Hayden saying, seeing and hearing well, and I'm seeing you well. Hayden, I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're catching up on Drag Race for the both of us, because I truly have not watched any of this season 17. I heard it was a good Rusical, and that they're going to go to vinyl with the Rusical, which is so cool. Put some respect on those queens that do all that live singing and performing and actually like release it in a format that people can buy. I think that's so cool. And Ryan Bragg saying hello to everybody. And Tim Burnham is here, who I'm going to be streaming with this Thursday on Near Condition to do an evergreen show for Daredevil, which has a slightly different format than the shows we've done so far, which is making me very worried, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. Cruel Angel saying that there's a little bit of a lag. I think my computer is just struggling today. I don't know what to tell you. I can try to talk slower. Maybe the lag will be less apparent if I talk slower. Hello from Chris Brogan. A hello from Ted. Cruel Angel, Dark Patterns. I love that it's like a certain number of cases. I think that's really, really cool. For one of my big complaints lately is like, enough with the 6-issue arcs that don't go anywhere until the 5th issue. Just to see something get in and out and give us a really satisfying case in 3 issues. Big fan. Also, big fan of Lance J. McNair. Hello, Lance. And I think I've said hello to all the unique human beings who are here so far. Michael Wesselius. Hello, Krisis. Happy to see you. I'm happy to see you as well. Is it Michael or Mikiel? We all know I'm terrible at pronouncing every name, even my own. So please do not take offense. Okay. Of course, there's many other people watching than just that, but those of you who chimed in the chat, that's who I'm talking about. Somebody left the nicest, kindest comment last week saying that they made a YouTube login just so they could leave a comment to let me know they're one of the kind of silent majority who is watching the show. That's so cool. And I just want to let you know, all views are valid. You could be listening to me while driving your car, so you don't chime in the chat. You could be listening to me a month from now. I appreciate that you trust me enough and my totally insane opinion on comic books to let that into your life, because, you know, we do have a choice and about what we let into our brains and our ears. And I think sometimes people are too passive about that and they don't make good decisions. They're like, oh, I hear that song on the radio all the time. Then turn off the radio. In fact, I think this rant may actually be morphing into today's moment of crisis. So it's really interesting. And this is, as always, truly extemporaneous, because it just hit me like a lightning bolt just now that this draws together some things that have been on my mind. So a lot of people really do not do anything to focus on or control their passive consumption. And what I mean by passive consumption is it's the things that they are absorbing unconsciously all the time. The radio just being on in their car or the office, looking at billboards, ads in magazines or ads on TV, all of the media that we consume that we don't deliberately intend to consume, right? When we're walking through a shopping mall and seeing all the store window fronts between where we walk in and the store we're actually going through, that is all passive media consumption. But there are some kinds of media that it's really hard to consume passively. It's hard to consume a book passively, right? Because you've got to put some effort into opening up and reading it or listening to the audiobook. You would have to be somewhere where someone else was listening to an audiobook or like listening to your kid read aloud to passively or unconsciously or unwillingly consume a book. But what's really interesting is that media that has the most passive consumption tends to have a lot more opinions and critique around it, right? Like if there's especially in New Zealand, the YouTube ads we get, not so varied because they're mostly New Zealand companies targeting us here in New Zealand. So no matter what, I refuse to pay for YouTube Premium. So I am having to passively consume some YouTube ads. And so I have some opinions on ads from companies that I will probably never buy from. I barely know who they are, but I've seen their ads a number of times. And trust me, this does all connect to comics because the thing I'm coming around to is things that are easier to consume and easier to passively consume tend to have more opinions. Over the last 3 weeks, the vast majority of people in the world who watch televised media and streaming media have been exposed to Not Like Us, a song by Kendrick Lamar. So all of a sudden, whether or not they wanted to have an opinion on that song, they have an opinion on that song. So things that are more passively consumed and more widely consumed have more opinions, which brings us to comic books. It's real darn hard to passively consume a comic book. They're a pretty small, gate-kept kind of media that you can only acquire certain places and in certain kinds of ways. And it's quite expensive, both in price, even if you're doing subscriptions and things to lessen the price, and in time to consume a comic book. So I find that the higher the barrier of entry to a form of consumption, the more people will say, well, if you don't like it, just stop consuming it, right? And the lower the barrier of entry to the means of consumption, the more people are willing to just say like, oh, well, that's a good opinion. I suppose you can have that opinion on Not Like Us, on McDonald's, on things that everybody has to see, right? And so I think that contributes to two things in the realm of comic books. One is a toxic positivity, right? Because if you're out there saying this issue is awful, I hated it, you usually get surrounded by a crowd of people saying, why are you even saying that? Why are you even reading this issue? These comics are just for people that like them, right? And that's a really common response that you get when you go into any place where there's any kind of discussion on a comic book and you have a negative opinion on a comic book. The only places you tend to see more negative opinions on comic books are comic books that more people routinely consume. So there's always negative opinions of Amazing Spider-Man because so many people go, well, it's Spider-Man, I should read it. So those tippity top tier of comics that are the most familiar characters and the titles that people expect to be reading tend to have the most kind of passive viewers. And so since there are more passive viewers, even if they're kind of active because they're choosing, there's more stratification of opinions. And so there's not as much toxic positivity around those. But if you go to a comic that's a little bit more obscure, but that's still like a DC or Marvel or Image or Dark Horse or big label comic, generally the people that are still there on issue 3 or beyond are the people who really liked it. And if you say, well, that was a 1-star issue, they're like, well, then drop it. But I think there's another thing other than toxic positivity at play there. There's also this idea of lack of critical sentiment, and they're hand in hand, right? Because the toxic positivity isn't just you can't have a good idea. It's like, or a bad idea about a comic. It's that only good ideas here, good vibes only. I don't know why you would say bad things about that artist. Why would you say bad things about art, right? That, and then the other side is just the lack of the bottom end of critical sentiments. When you only get positive sentiments, you're not experiencing, as somebody who's engaging in that art community, any kind of critique that's going to make you think more about the book. Why was that one page a little bit confusing? You could still say it's a 5-star book, but sometimes I'll see in a 5-star reviews, this is a 5-star book, except for that one page. But since there's that toxic positivity culture, and since there's only people consuming issue 4 and beyond that really love that comic, nobody's there really dissecting it. And I think ultimately that is bad for art. Any kind of art where all of a sudden there's nobody looking at it critically, I think it's hard for it to maintain its quality and the level of discourse around it. If you look at films, right, there's people who will view bad films just to view bad films and write on their letterbox, I almost got a litter box, why this film was bad and why I felt it was bad. But in comics, there's just not that. And I'm surprised because with the advent of things like Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite Universe and global comics, comics are so much more accessible and cheaply accessible than they ever have before in any point in history other than maybe the 1960s. And so I just expect that more people are going to be reading more comics and having opinions on more comics. But no, people still value their time a lot. And so they're not going to go 12 issues deep into a bad series the way I will sometimes do. And the reason I was thinking about this week is because I had made the mistake of making a couple public comments outside comments, comics for comments, first time in the stream. Everybody drink your tea or whatever. I made a few public comments about some comics I disliked this week. And I had people be like, that's the best one of the line, or that's my favorite book. And they're like, why would you even come here and say that? And just being flabbergasted that, not that they were upset that I came there and said that, but that really there had been no critical sentiment that they had specifically heard about that book before. And then on the other side, I have 2 books this week that I've decided that even if though they are in the Marvel and DC oeuvre that I try to read everything, I'm just dropping them for my personal mental health because I just hate them. And I think after reading 21 issues that I hate almost every issue of, I've confirmed that I don't like it. And I probably have said all of the critical things I can say about it. And even the utility of me giving you additional critical thoughts in this stream has decreased. So how do I sum up that moment of crisis? I think it's important in comics that we try to read things that are not familiar and that we try to have opinions on things other than just positive opinions. And for me, that's what this show is. Am I going to still be reading 60 comics a week when we get to December if I manage to keep doing the show? I don't think so, because I think by that point, I will have worked out what my tastes are and it will be easier for me to know earlier in a book if I like it or don't. Right now, I'm getting all of Mad Cave's books because I just don't have a critical sentiment about Mad Cave right now. But Vault, for me, even though they're having some publishing problems, I also know Vault books generally don't appeal to me anymore. So I can just read issue 1 and not like hang in there. And I think for me, getting back to the show is trying to immerse myself back in the critical sentiment I have around comics and decide what are the publishers I like now, writers, artists, tropes, themes, so that I can kind of redevelop that. And I hope by watching this, by hearing me talk about these books, by sometimes going after a book that I recommended highly, or some of you go after books that I say I thought were horrible and you read them, I hope that we're all getting a little bit deeper into our ability to interrogate the comics and know what our critical sentiment is and not to be trapped in that zone of only reading comics that make us happy and comfortable all of the time, so much as we can afford to read more. And affording is not just about money, it's also about time. So that is my moment of crisis today. You never know what I'm going to say. You just never know. I was maybe going to talk about all the Comic Pro announcements, DC versus Marvel, right? This is going to start. We're going to have 2 DC versus Marvel one-shots later this year, which is just wild to think that that's going to happen again. So, you know, there's some things that broke as news. I had to think about X-Men because we've learned some of the X-Men titles are actually looks like they're going to be canceled. NYX, X-Force, and X-Factor. Also, I think Marvel's starting to give us some hints that there might be a line-wide reboot, not like a continuity reboot, but a numbering reboot coming, because DC's doing it too, and Marvel all of a sudden has a lot of series lapse. But you know what? Those could be future moments of crisis. So let's just see what a couple of folks have said, and then we got to get on to the books. James Abel, on the topic of cancellation, says it looks like DC have canceled Power Girl and Shazam, and Marvel has canceled the 3 X books I just mentioned. Shame about Shazam because I think it's one of the best comics going right now. But Power Girl, I'm kind of surprised it lasted that long. It just never seemed to find its audience either of rabid existing Power Girl fans or of new fans who were rabid about the character for the first time. Manuel saying hello from Montreal. Salut, Manuel. Comment ça va? Lots of snow here. Cold goes with have. So, tu es fois? I'm doing a lot of Duolingo lately because somebody in my family, the parts of the family I speak to, put me on the family plan. And now I have all these magical powers in Duolingo. I used to have like a 600-day streak when I first got to New Zealand. And I really think those streaks, they should be a percentage streak. It should be like 600 out of 601 days because I would still feel like an A student in that case. But just by breaking the streak, I know it's because they're trying to create addiction, but I think there's other ways to do positive reinforcement. So anyway, I stopped learning French for like 7 years. Of course, I had a lot of French and spoke decently and read pretty well at some point long ago before some of you were born. But so I'm happy to be back to it because I think that keeps my brain young. Just like reading lots of comics and listening to lots of music, I think using your brain to learn new things keeps your brain young. Cruel Angel, still sad about MIX, and MIX was good this week. I thought we'll get to it. Here's James supplying Max Appleman's YouTube. Please go watch his Beeble Bops. His Beeble Bops. I'm a big fan. R.I.P. to NYX. Oh, Neil's in New Zealand. I'm sorry, Neil. For some reason, I thought you were in Australia from last year or last week. So you're in New Zealand. Wonderful. Logan Wayne, Moment of Krisis about the forthcoming Marvel versus DC collaboration. See, I had some topics to choose from today. 5th of Jack Gaming, loving my Moment of Krisis with my laptop scream. Hello, Crisis. 5th of Jack Gaming, one of those people that's in that Friends of Crushing Krisis strip on the channel, so you can find his channel. He does weekly reviews too, and you should go and check them out. Flavio MRP saying hello all. Tim Burnham turned in your list for the, I don't know when I'm going to do my list for the Daredevil Evergreen stream. Y'all, there's so much stuff that happens backstage to make some of these near mid condition streams happen. And I am the stage manager and co-host of the Evergreen streams. And I truly don't know when this week I'm going to have time to do that. But you know what? It's just going to happen. RemXO saying hello, everyone. The artist formerly known as Jesse Say What saying happy Sunday. Lance chiming in to say, toxic positivity usually limits the most interesting discussions in my experience. Mine as well. But also you have to watch out for like toxic negativity too, or like unfiltered negative critical sentiment, right? Logical negative. If there's only ever negativity about something, then you're not really having an interesting conversation either. So I do, in the books I hate, try to still find some positive, and that's my continual challenge, because I know that I tend to go logical negative. I am known amongst my friends for, even if I say that I love something so much, I will still be like, oh, but here's all the things that sucked. And they're like, wait, you gave that like 4 stars and you have that many things about it that sucked. So I'm always in a journey in my life to try to soften my toxic negativity. Max Appleman, not since Blood Train have we experienced such polarizing takes on a comic this week. Omnibo is all alone at work, which means he is cranking the crisis. I should be jamming then. We should be wailing. I should do some AC/DC for you or something. But that means he can watch. Lance McNair just started Severance, and yes, Britt Lower is Gene. Okay, so if you follow me on other media, I always do a little bit of Severance chat over the weekend, which now has bled into the show 3 weeks running. And there's one actress on the show, Britt Lower. I think it's because she looks like Famke Janssen. Honestly, that there's so many people think she would be a good Jean Grey, but I just think she'd be a great Jean Grey. Kyle the Mighty, practice toxic neutrality. Can neutrality be contract? I guess if you're always like, well, I don't know, I can't pick, or like, that's a little harsh, maybe we could be fair. There's a way to like use neutrality in a blanket way that is toxic. Tim Burnham says, can you imagine it was virtually impossible for him, a Daredevil list? Yeah, Tim Burnham is probably one of the top 10 Daredevil fans existing on the planet Earth. So if Tim had a trouble picking for the Evergreen stream, I probably have no hope. I have an inkling. I maybe know 2 out of the 3 that I'm going to pick, but I need to like sit down and do the homework. And Logan Wayne, a lot of YouTube channels out there that choose to only crap on certain movies or comics, right? And because they know that gets views. Honestly, I think that's why I was getting views the first few weeks of more looky-loos. The looky-loos on this have kind of drifted off a little bit compared to the first few weeks, because I was like saying the problem with blah in my subjects, and I was, and I was screaming more. And now I'm starting to mellow a little bit more, but that's not always as good as the screaming for things, right? Okay. If you hear some doorbell ringing and knocking in the background, there are some other things happening in the house today that I am, for the moment, not in charge of. But if I have to go be in charge of them, we will just manage that. So before I get into the comics, I guess this is the time. You know what? I'm going to put up the AMA banner now, but we did just talk kind of a lot. And also, am I still lagging? Because it's still feeling like a little herky-jerky on the side. And is it loud enough is always the other question. I mean, I'm loud, but the microphone sometimes decides to not be. So if there's any burning questions that you had, please ask, because I'm really going to try to stay focused on the comics. You don't have to drink that time. I said it. Comics this time. And last time I took a break after the A's. Like, that's like saying, I'm going to hold my breath and go under. Like when little kids are afraid of going under the door and they go, I put my head under. And you're like, you didn't actually go under. That was me taking a break after the A's last week. I think I could probably make it a little bit farther into the alphabet. So let's see if anybody has any big questions. They could be about comics. They could be about food. They could be about New Zealand. They could be about my hair. I think last week was peak hair. This hair's okay. It's okay today. But I don't know if it's as grand as it was last week. Last week was really as good as it tends to look. Okay. Chris Brogan saying that the video and audio looks good. Max Appleman saying, loud enough lag happens sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I guess. I just, I need a new computer, and there's only so many hours in the day and so many dollars in the bank account. And so we just make do. All right. If you have questions, we will just catch the questions as we go. I just want to say hello to Next Imaginaut, who I have not said hello yet. Oh, and here's a question. Do I care about the Oscars, like watching every nominated movie? Flavio, I used to try to at least watch the big ones back in the day, even probably before I had Kid Crisis. And then after that, probably less and less. And then since I've been in New Zealand, I just don't understand what streaming network has stuff. And there's no like disc Netflix here. And it's just so much harder to get movies unless you're just going to rent them. And I refuse to pay that money. Like I just want to subscribe to something. So I was just joking with friends this weekend that on my new movies to watch list at the top is The Shape of Water, which I think got nominated in like 2017 or 2018. But that's how behind on movies I am. I only usually watch like 3 or 4 movies a year now at the most. So I'm super, super behind. I really want to see the substance. But also, I think I've seen enough movies in my life, and I'm not a huge movie fan. And most movies for me are just like, whatever. But I kind of know what I like and what I don't like, so I don't feel the need to see 100 movies a year anymore. But I will also say I love the Oscars. I'm addicted to Oscar speeches. I'm addicted to that idea of like a moment in somebody's life that is so particular, so memorable, so significant, being seen by the entire world. Like, how wild is that? Think about like the top 3 moments in your life that have been so memorable and significant, whatever they might be, positive or negative. And then thinking about having a high definition recording of that. So I'm obsessed with that. I have Oscar speeches that I probably watched 500 times. Marion Cotillard for La Vie en Rose. It is true there are angels in this city. Yeah, there are certain ones that I've seen so many times. So I love the Oscars for the speeches, whereas the Grammys, I've usually actually heard everything, but the Oscars, I've actually seen nothing, and I just watch for the speeches because I'm a freak, and then I rewatch them all year. Last year had some good speeches, but the year before was better because the year before was it last year that was Everything Everywhere All at Once, or was the year before? That year just had good speeches. No, it was the year before because Brendan Fraser won that year too. Yeah, last year I don't feel like there were that many good speeches. Maybe I'm forgetting a good one. Omnibo, when can we get a Crisis guitar-wielding hero comic done? He fights crime and he sings. Well, I have a novel very famously that when I first launched my Patreon, I thought part of it was going to be fiction and then nobody was reading it, so I stopped. But that I wrote during National Novel Writing Month, and it's a novel that, loosely had me as a main character, but over time the character became very different than me, but it was based on me and my best friend who were in a band together. And so the characters both share their love of music, and there's a lot of music stuff seeded through the plot, like song references and David Bowie things and stuff. So originally I was writing that novel as the prequel story, and then the idea was that I would do a comic that was more of the kind of like the exciting, vital part of the story. And then the novel would actually be the long kind of backstory prequel that maybe wouldn't be as excited to be a comic. I would love to get back to doing fiction. I do quite proudly think I'm particularly okay at it for somebody who's never been officially published. But, it's just, who would read it, right? Like if you were all saying like, hey, we 50, 60, 80, 100, 1,000 people that are watching your YouTube show would check out your fiction, on a regular basis, I would maybe bring it back. So, and I would love to make one comic. It's on my bucket list along with having abs. I would like to be able to say I did one issue of one comic, but who knows when. And plus I'd have to find an artist I really truly vibe with, and a colorist, because we know I have really strong opinions about colorists. Oh boy, I lost track of the chat. Okay, only a few more AMAs and then we're going to get to the main event. Carlos Arguelles, damn, I'm late, but greetings, don't worry, we're still just doing the small talk. Next, Imaginaut chiming in with the hello for the shout out. Lance McNair saying going to try to catch Nickel Boys. I've literally never even heard of that since I'm on an AMCA A-list. See, if we had that stuff here, if there were like movie theater memberships and stuff, I probably would maybe see, although I do hate going to the movie theater. I just want to do everything in my house, y'all. I do not like leaving my house. Tim Vernon in the same boat, still need to see Parasite. I did see Parasite. I do manage to see like one big conversation movie every year. I'm not big into movies and TVs, but I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have, and I like it, but I have one crisis contrary opinion alert. I like Korra better because I saw Korra first, and it's so sophisticated and adult. People are like, I don't like her character. She's just a young person trying to like figure out who she is in the world while being asked to be the most significant human being. I love the animation style. I love that kind of like semi steampunky level of technology in the world. Then after that, I saw original Avatar with Aang, and it's good and I like it, but it's just like a little more immature, and also because they had so many more episodes, there's more like one-offy Monster of the Weeky episodes, although it does all feed into the plot still, whereas Korra felt very streamlined and like everything was like about it. But I do really enjoy them both. I've never seen any of the, I think we watched 1 or 2 episodes of the live action on Netflix, and it was fine, but it was like missing that charm of the cartoon. Am I watching Invincible or Harley? Scott Green, no. I used to watch Harley when I think at some point DC Infinite Universe was like bundled with HBO Max, or like I remember being able to see stuff and read stuff, and I was watching Harley at that point, and it was very, very funny. It reminded me of Archer. I love Archer. I do like things that are a bit ribald and slightly politically incorrect, and so Harley scratched that itch. I don't really like the Invincible comic at all. I'm not a big Robert Kirkman fan, so I don't really have any reason to watch the show. James Abel wants Nora to win Oscars. I am always aware of all of them because I like watching. I love also the craft of acting, so I'll watch all their like variety actors on actors type things too, because I used to act and I love media and how people put thought into. I just don't see the movies. This year at the Oscars, I'm on Team Wicked. I think there's a weird thing happening because they know the second Wicked movie is going to come out next year and they know they're going to nominate them again. So I think a lot of voters, I love the psychology of awards voters. I think a lot of voters are like, well, why should I vote for them this year? And this is across all of the awards. Why should I vote for them this year? Well, I deal with this flyaway when I can have a chance to vote for them again next year, but that might bite them because if there's a lot of better performances next year, they're going to miss it. I think Cynthia Erivo, just on odds, doesn't seem like she has a big chance unless Demi and Mickey, what is her name, Madsen from Anora, like totally split the vote. But Cynthia Erivo was kind of in the top 2 of the odds, and now she's kind of down to 3 or 4. I love the odds of Oscars. I love Gold Derby and all that stuff. So, but I haven't seen Wicked, so. I remember reading the book of Wicked way back in the day. All right, Smother Leon, how do I get your books local? I don't. I read everything digital, and all of the stuff I still order from American people and sometimes have to pay ridiculous customs fees, which is the law of my country. And I want the Internal Revenue Department to know that I'm obeying that law. But that's how I get all my books. Logan Wayne, thoughts on the latest X-Men Omni announcement? I'm not familiar with this period, but it seems like a pretty odd choice. He's talking about the announcement of X-Men by Mark Guggenheim, which could be called X-Men Gold, but then we would get confused with the blue and gold omnibus they've announced for the 1990s. I would say it's the worst X-Men material that's ever been published, actually. People think Chuck Austin's the worst because they haven't read enough bad stuff. Kind of goes back to my Moment of Krisis. There's nothing worse than the material in the Mark Guggenheim omnibus, and you can quote me on that. And I just like a lot of X-Men. Well, you know, if there was an omnibus of the current X-Men, that might be worse. But Mark Guggenheim's X-Men, his Young X-Men series from 2010 that was meant to like extend the Academy X team to be their own team, may be the worst X-Men comic I've ever read. It's truly bad. I know he's like a TV guy. And the other thing is he's writing a new series for Marvel, or a couple of new series for Marvel. Marvel does this. When they have an author coming up in one of their books, they kind of look through their backlist and they're like, oh, we're going to be talking about that guy. Let's look for an omnibus we can put out, you know, to put on the comps list. Like, if you like this, get this, which is weird thinking. Because like, you're going to put out a whole terrible X-Men Guggenheim omnibus that nobody asked for when there's literally 50 omnibuses by X-Men that people want more than that. I know because I have the data from the Nermit condition poll. Just because he's going to be writing one new comic, that's weird. This year I have a Brazilian movie nominated for Best Picture and leading actress for Best Actress. Yes, I've heard really good things about her performance. And all right, just checking to see if anybody else has asked a question. And I think we're mostly just chatting about the things I'm chatting about, which is wonderful. So please continue to do that. And just know that I don't tend to highlight your comments if you're adding each other, because I want to just give you a chance to like have a community with each other and talk to each other. So I don't tend to highlight those. And so if you want me to highlight something in the breaks that I do take, I probably will not highlight something you've added somebody else. All right. So my computer is lagging so much. I don't want to have to restart, but I'm just going to have to keep an eye on the chat to see if you tell me that the lag has become unbearable or the quality has gone down. And then we will just have to figure out how to deal with it. But until then, we are just going to try to roll with it. And again, things are happening in Shea Crisis today. Things are on the move. So if I have to just briefly step away, or heaven only knows what else might happen, then we're just going to, what do? We resolve, we repair, and we recover. So oh boy, I've got all my PDFs open. Hopefully my computer doesn't crash. Hopefully you tell me if there's problems, and we're going to begin. There we go. I did not get all through my polls this week. As you heard, I was still reading as we got very down to the last possible second. So I didn't get to read 2000 AD this week. And I'm borderline dropping 2000 AD. It's not as exciting as I always thought it might be. I saw 2 questions, so I just want to highlight them really quick. which book did I give up on? You will hear a little bit later, Jason. And also, any idea about a Fantastic Four by Dan Slott omnibus? You know, this would be the year for Fantastic Four omnibuses. And I think that Marvel probably wants to sell through the remainder of those oversized hardcovers that they did for Dan Slott. Again, I never have insider information. I just go on sales data prognosticating. So I don't think it's going to happen for a while. Although I think if you look at how many omnibuses of Fantastic Four are left to even do, I think that is the next obvious one. So if the movie's a big hit and they decide that Fantastic Four are going to get an omnibus 2 new every single year from now on, I think we'll see it next year. So I think if the movie does well, I'm going to say next year. But that last OHC is still pretty fresh. So I still feel like they are going to want to sell through it. Okay. So as I said, 2000 AD, did not read. Okay. Next, we have Alien Paradiso. Oh, I unfortunately did read this one. Okay, so Alien Paradiso is a comic book by Steve Fox with art from Edgar Salazar and Victor Neva and also Jason Muir, colors by Carlos Lopez, and Xenomorph Point of View by Peter Nguyen and letters by Clayton Cowles. And this week I remember to take a page that is the Xenomorph point of view. I kind of like it. It's like weird, like, is it Daredevil? They can hear noises. Is it infrared? It's really cool. It's kind of hard to follow at first, but the more you kind of like get farther away and get closer to it, you can really tell what's going on. And I think it's a really neat look. It's probably the best thing that's happening in this comic. Here's the thing. I think I've learned that a lot of people read Aliens and they just want the bloody stuff. I read Aliens and I want to see a group of people, some of whom I'm intrinsically rooting for because either they're good people or I want them to have another chance. And some people I'm intrinsically rooting to have their chest burst. And this comic just doesn't quite get to that bar. They're on this paradise planet. They're at a resort. Some of them are mobsters. Some of them are federal agents. But there's also guests and employees in the mix. And I feel like that's where the heart of this is. And the fact that it's just focusing on this conflict between the agents and the mobsters is just not giving me anybody that I'm like fundamentally on their side or not. And so it's fine. It's made well, but it's just not really going anywhere for me. Then we come to another Alien comic, but this is Aliens versus Avengers. Of course, it's by Big Daddy Hickman, along with Esad Ribic on artwork and colors from Ives Sorsina and letters by VC's Corey Petit. This is one that I think I have a little bit of a divided opinion from folks this week. This didn't work for me at all. And it didn't work for me for a similar reason that the Aliens book didn't work for me, which is that you need some people to root for and root against. So now this did give us somebody to root against in the form of Mr. Sinister, actually the form of several Mr. Sinisters, but he's not really versus the alien right now. He is just abetting the aliens in their goal. And Hickman killed off so many of the Avengers characters already that we're down to so few that are interesting and to root for. He introduces 3 X-Men here, Wolverine, Armor, and White Queen, alongside the 3 Avengers that we have, but it just feels so constrained. I was having so much more fun in the first 2 issues when there was just so much else going on. I appreciate that Hickman working in this out of continuity oeuvre means that he has the ability to kill a lot more characters, but it's hurting me and my interest because I'm not rooting for anybody. And I think that's a big component for me reading any book, but especially a book that's predicated on like bloody murder, is I just have to be rooting for a group of people pretty strongly. And when I lose that, I really quickly lose interest. But that's me. If you want to see the Avengers picked off one by one and Hickman kind of like basically doing one of his versions of Hickman the End, I think that this could be really appealing to you. And I love the stuff he's doing with the Aliens continuity, actually much more than I do with the Marvel continuity. It's so funny. We've never really seen Hickman on any other IP, have we? I think Hickman could write like the best alien movie of all time based on what he's been doing here. Okay, moving on. Oh, and I'm trying to actually keep a little bit of an eye on the chat as we're going so that I can see if people like things as I'm reading them. So Max really enjoyed Aliens versus Avengers. It does get a little bleak, but I really enjoyed the surprise reveal. James Abel said, how's the series so effing great? Amazing artwork, interesting plot, twists I didn't see coming. And if you love Aliens, you need to read this. I do still agree that it's good. Just because I was softer on this issue. And also, I don't think Esad Ribic really understood how to draw Mr. Sinister. He kind of just looks like a weird vampire. There's something a little bit off about his character model and his face, and it really was like taking me out of it. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad comic. It's just that this week, it didn't really work for me, which is surprising because I really, really liked the first 2 issues. All right, now we come to yet another issue of the ongoing death of Spider-Man, or should I say the 8 deaths of Spider-Man. This one is by Justina Ireland. I think it's her last issue before Joe Kelly comes back, and also with art by Andre Bricardo, inks by Scott Hanna, and colors by Marcio Menez, letters from Joe Caramanga. I really like this one. It really worked. Spider-Man got back in the mix We had some really good art. There was consequences. We got to see how good Andrea Picardo is at drawing Spider-Man in costume, which is why I think they probably got hired for this job, because they're not as good at some of the other stuff. And we got some fun X-Men stuff too. To me, this is not a best ever Spider-Man arc, but I think in terms of arcs that are going to collect well and that it's going to be fun to read in the future because they're like one specific story, one specific thing altogether, I actually think that this 8 Deaths arc is going to work really well. I don't think you've got to run out and buy it necessarily, but I think if you've got Marvel Unlimited, it's going to be really fun to binge in a couple of months when it is all in one place. All right, now we move on to Marvel's web-only books, starting with Astonishing Avengers. This took a break week last week, so I was afraid it might be over, but it's not. It's by Steve Orlando with art still by Francesco Archidiacono, even though we're into a new arc here. Colors by Carlos Lopez and letters by Travis Lanham. I liked this. I think that first arc just had so many Avengers characters, and it wasn't just the white jacket characters that Steve Orlando has established starting in his Avengers Assemble miniseries at the end of 2024, which is pretty good. I can recommend it. Nice thick reads too. The issues were substantial. Now that we're back down to just a small subset of the jacket team, it just works so much better. I also love the Avengers do have a rich history, and I think that people have an ahistorical view of Avengers because they tend to only know Avengers from Bendis forward if they're modern readers, because people don't know a lot of 1963 Avengers, through the whole run of that series through 1996. And so I like what Orlando is doing is he's picking relationships, he's picking villains that reference things in that run. You don't need to know it back to front, but there is a lot to mine. And I think that we too often treat it just as this blind spot to be ignored. And I think that's what's going to be fun about this. If we can use some of the B string kind of Avengers, if we can take a look back at old plots and reference old things that they left lying around. It's like how the X-Men always can find another Ngari Demon, and it always is referencing that one original Ngari Demon that they found early in Claremont's run for like the one-off issue. Avengers has that kind of continuity too, and nobody really uses it because Avengers now has become the big book because of the movie, and so it's always got to be big and accessible, and they're not going to kind of look inwardly as much. But if also the art in this was great. This art is great. The character design of this villain, totally awesome. Really nice job from Francesco Archidiacono. The thing is, I can talk quickly until I come upon one word that I'm not sure how to say, and then the whole house of cards tumbles down. This is Astonishing Spider-Man number 17, written by Scott Ackerman and art by Julian Shaw, colors by Cece De La Cruz, and letters by Joe Supino. I wish this book would just stick with the thing that it's good at doing, which is him flying around and going, funny, because this conversation with Mary Jane, first of all, it's the most off character model Mary Jane I've ever seen. You could have given me 10 guesses and I wouldn't have guessed that it was Mary Jane. Decent use of vertical scroll though, even though it was a very talky comic. Like this scrolled down onto the brick wall and then we realized we were looking at them through a window and we were scrolling down past the window as they were talking. That's clever. I like that. But this conversation with Mary Jane, I don't think it's right. And she's like basically saying to Peter, haven't you been Spider-Man long enough? Maybe you could give up being Spider-Man because this villain is telling him to give up. And he's like, well, what about you? Are you going to keep being Jackpot? And it was just such an interesting dichotomy because I think her reasons for him not being Spider-Man didn't track for me. It didn't sound like Mary Jane. But then her reasons that she's temporarily Jackpot and she knows she's not going to do that forever actually were very sound. So it wasn't like she was totally off voice. It just was a weird push and pull. I just wish this comic would like focus on fun Spider-Man adventures and try to leave this emotional stuff to the main book. Because when it comes down to it, none of the emotional stuff that's happening between Peter and MJ in a web-only series is ever going to matter to the print comics. So why are we pretending, Like, just give us fun adventures. Astonishing X-Men. This is the continuing arc by Tim Seeley with art by Eduardo Audino, colors from KJ Diaz and VC's Clayton Cowles. This continues to be one of the best X-Men books every week, and you can just read it on Marvel Unlimited. Like, WTF, y'all. It's only in small slices, so it's basically, it's been the same story the past couple weeks. I'm going to repeat myself, but it's Cap and Juggernaut learning how to work together, and Cap respecting Juggernaut's intentions and respecting that Juggernaut's an unstoppable force and how to like put that to good use. I would say this one's like a little softer than the last couple just because they have to do so much fighting in this one that it does kind of just turn into a fight comic at a point, and there's a lot of specific kind of tenderly action happening as they kind of confront Black Tom and whatever he might be possessed by that takes up a lot of panel space. But this Juggernaut and Cap, the art is outstanding, and Tim Seeley's voice for these characters is outstanding. So I'm a big fan, and I continue to be a big fan of this comic. Yeah. I'm not going to full on check the chat. I just want to make sure that everything's going well. Okay. Oh, and I do see One Wheelchair X here. Hello, One Wheelchair X. One Wheelchair X, another channel that is highlighted on the Friends of Crushing Krisis strip on my YouTube channel. If you want to go check out his videos that are deep dives into the From the Ashes comics. Hope everything's good. Just joining down. I do love that even though this is Avengers versus Aliens, Hickman still has found a way to get the X-Men involved. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just save Aliens versus X-Men for like a totally separate series. And that he's doing it in this series, right? That's like a whole other series you could sell. So, but maybe there'll be a spinoff. Who knows? Okay. Now we come to, actually, there's one more digital comic after this one. This is Avengers Academy, which I've been telling you for eons that I love and I was going to finally catch up with. This is by Anthony Oliveira, art by Pablo Collar, colors by KJ Diaz, and letters by Ariana Mayer. I loved this issue so much. So last issue, the Enchantress made everybody confess their real feelings for each other in a way that was totally in character and totally worked. This comic focuses on this very funny, quippy character, the Rhinoceros, that Oliveira has established as one of the recurring villains in this run, but she's not really a villain. She's like a goon for hire. And this is just her whole story. And I loved it so much. It's just a very clever, funny comic that you can go and read. I love, they connect her to Dr. Rao, who is part of Joss Whedon's The Cure arc in Astonishing X-Men. But Dr. Rao's like, you have a legally distinct mutation that makes you not a mutant. It just gives you superpowers. And then she decides that she hates Dr. Rao and breaks out of her lab. And you see her running away from the lab down the vertical scroll. But the scroll is also showing her go older and older at every age, because the implication is that she just goes and wrecks her lab whenever she has a chance. And it even scrolled farther, and I couldn't fit it all into one screenshot to get all the way to her in the modern day. It's just a really delightful character breakdown of this one small character, and I think that's why I love the series. I usually don't like series that have such a big cast. That started with a cast of 6 or maybe 8 very specific students, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot. Now we're up to like 16 students and all these villains and all this other stuff, but I just feel like they're very distinct, and Oliveira has a very good idea of who they all are and what he wants to say with them all, and that makes it really, really fun for me. And that, you know, I was reading something this week about it must have been Kieran Gillen. It was Kieran Gillen talking about power fantasy. So maybe I'll save it. But it's this idea that you can only hold so much information in your brain at once. It also is connected to why phone numbers in the United States originally only had 7 digits before area codes really became required, because 7 is that magical number that most people can on average hold 7 pieces of information, bits of data in their brain in the present moment. And so that's why so many superhero teams have 6 or 7 characters, because that they assume that, see, I'm going to tell the whole thing now. They assume that's the only amount of information you're going to be able to track as a reader. And that's true for me, because I'm like a goldfish. So when it gets to be a really big cast, I get nervous. I'm not going to remember who they are or understand them. And this book is doing a really good job of juggling that. Oh, and just really adorable interior art. And I loved this moment from her talking to Bloodline's daughter, saying, I don't believe in family. Family's wrong. Family cut out me the first chance it got. But what we got in here, that's everything to me. And you're welcome to it. That's the deal. Which, like, talking not only about found family, but like safe spaces. And she's a bouncer at this club that the characters have been going to on the all ages night. And she's basically saying, like, in this club, we're all going to have your back. And I really love that kind of character beat. I gave up Barstow kind of early from Dark Horse Comics. I didn't really understand what it was about. It's like, I mean, I could tell you what it's about. It's an FBI agent going to Barstow, and in this small town, some other agent got killed, and she's trying to find out why. But after reading the first issue, I'm like, well, what else is there to know about this story? And so I did not keep reading it. I did, however, read Batman Superman World's Finest. This is issue 36. And, you know, you've heard me be really hard on this title because it's all retcon stories. And I'm like, what is the point? Why are we doing this? But actually, I did like this issue. And I think I liked it because I think Adrian Gutierrez had a much better handle on the art this time. Last time, as we were descending into the world of Atlantis and Aquaman, it felt like that lack of weight was really causing the artist to struggle with placing characters in the frame and how they should move. I feel like that was much more resolved in this issue. Also, I just like the Floronic Man. I think he's fun. I think any issue with the Floronic Man tends to tickle my fancy. And so I enjoyed that this is the Floronic Man under the sea. Like, that's even one more level of cool and funny. And also it's playing with Superman, like how does Superman get around magic on this beautiful, beautiful page. He's got magic bonds, and he's like, I could still just break the thing the bonds are tied to, you know, which I think is a really fun Superman moment. And that's the thing, Mark Waid has an unlimited number of fun moments that he can contribute, but why? Why are we enduring this? Why is it being made? Is it just being made to be a pleasant frippery that has like no real weight? The thing that Wade's doing that's interesting is a lot of these arcs do actually seed concepts into other books, and I think that's a really interesting thing that Marvel and DC are both doing with their retcon series right now, which is instead of just using them as this toss away as nostalgia fodder to be like, hey, like this book, it's got old characters in their old costumes and you'll recognize them. Instead of saying, hey, we're telling an old story that seeds in a thing that we're going to then use in a newer story. And I much prefer that to then just every single story being like, this story is based on a villain you've never met before. That gets annoying. But if you're actually going to do the heavy lifting and tell us the whole story of the villain in the past, then okay, then that's valid. So, you know, in as much as he's using the book for that, I appreciate it. It's just not my thing generally, but I don't hate it the way I hated it earlier on. I think Absolute Power helped me appreciate that it was being used in that way. This is called Beastly Buddies. It's the other Marvel digital comic of this week. It's totally out of continuity. It's following this like a cute, super cute, toyetic little chibi version of Werewolf by Night and Man-Thing. And in this issue, they run into Rocket Raccoon and Groot. And the joke is that everybody thinks Werewolf by Night and Man-Thing are Rocket Raccoon and Groot. So it's super, super cute. I mean, it made me laugh a couple times. It's by Steve Fox with art from Armand Bodnar, colors from KJ Diaz, and letters from Joe Sabino. It's on your Marvel Unlimited, so, you know, like, enjoy it if you enjoy such things. But it was funny. It made me laugh. But it's totally out of continuity because, of course, Werewolf by Night was never a tiny, cute version of Werewolf by Night. Okay. Behemoth is another book that I dropped earlier this year. And this is interesting. Now we're getting to like 2s and 3s of issues that you've already heard me talk about at length previously. They're fighting. A kaiju comes to New York and a bunch of people are fighting off and he swallows their bus. So now they're in its stomach, which is an interesting concept. But again, it didn't clear the make this interesting bar for me when the first issue came out. I was like, why do I care about these people? Why do I care about this behemoth? So I didn't keep up with it. And then this book I just happened to see, but I did not read it. Peter Hogan's Black Forests, 6 stories of suspense in the supernatural. I'm not going to go out of my way to track down an anthology book because we know I don't love anthology books. So yeah. Borderlands, I think this is from like a video game or a TV show or something. Moxxi's Mysterious Memento. So I did not read this one. Plus it's 3 of 4. So like, am I going to jump in the deep end of the pool with issue number 3? I did, however, read Catwoman. So Catwoman, this is part of the ongoing run by Torun Grönbach. This one had art by, oh boy, these credits are small, Mariana Ignazi with colors by Patricio Del Pesce, letters by Steve Wands. I really like Steve Wands' letters, and cover by Sarah Fumera. Let's just really appreciate this cover for a second. This might have been my favorite cover of the week, actually. Really, really love it. I'm having a couple of struggles with this run, which is okay. It's good. I like it, but I'm struggling. First, I'm struggling with the art. I think this is our 3rd artist in like 5 issues. It's just, I like that they all have a very similar look to each other and they're being colored somewhat consistency, but I have a hard time paying attention when everything looks different and there's slightly different character models every issue. So that's 1. 2 is like, I want to see Catwoman have agency. And the thing I liked about the first couple of issues is it felt like she had agency to look into this guys of hers that had been declared dead when clearly she wasn't dead. She had agency to go and investigate it. She had agency to break in, but now it's starting to feel like she's just on the run. And Grönbach is a good enough writer that she can write Selena with agency on the run. So it still feels like she's got some choices and she's not just reacting. But I want to see Catwoman say why she cares about this history. Why does she not just cut and run? And I feel like that's really been missing and it's starting to wear on me. I really like to know the purpose. And when there's a lot of characters wandering around saying like, I should find out about the Blah because the Blah is deadly. I'm like, but that's not a reason. Like, why do you care? And I feel like that's kind of been missing for me a little bit. So it's an okay comic, but I can't say that I'm incredibly excited about it. James did read Behemoth. The series is taking elements from different kaiju and horror movies and merging them together. And this issue, we saw their version of Xenomorph. Okay. And also Matt Hawk saying, sorry he's late, but happy to catch live and hoping I'm having a great weekend. Well, it's a Monday and there's been some challenges, but maybe we'll get into that when I need to take a longer breather. James Abel saying Catwoman 73 Tokyo Cat and Mouse game is nearing an end, and Lance agreeing. That is a awesome Catwoman cover. So let's continue. Challengers of the Unknown. This is by Christopher Cantwell, creator of TV's *Halt and Catch Fire*, a show I actually watched and really like, but art by a whole crew of artists, because there's all different artists in each different scene. It's one of the hallmarks of this book. Sean Isaacs and Amanke Nalpan, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., and letters by Hassan Otsman Elho. I really like this book. I really do. I don't know if it has anything to do with any challenges of the unknown story that has ever existed in the world ever before. I cannot tell you that. What I can tell you is that I enjoy it. Why do I enjoy it? Because it's taking each challenger and showing what kind of weird, hard to explain connection they have to the energy of death, and then it's showing how little the Justice League trust them. But it has elements that make me like it beyond that, which is that these characters have agency, and it's perpendicular to the agency of the superheroes. So we're seeing the superheroes being like, oh, we want to team up with you, let's go to this island and investigate. So the Atom goes with one of the challengers to the island, but the challenger realizes they have a different goal on the island than the Atom does, and that's been the hallmark of each issue so far. So then we have a Justice League member with one specific kind of agency that wants the challenger to do something, and the challenger with a very different set of agency, which I think has been shown the best in issue number 2, which is the Batman team up. But to me, that's a great comic book. I want to see people who have specific, definable motivations working at cross purposes to each other. So I'm not sure which one of them to root for. And the end of this really does leave you unsure of if you want to root for the Justice League or the Challengers. It's not Justice League versus Challengers, but they're working in opposition to each other to a degree, and you might not be sure which one of them you want to succeed. I think that's a good comic book. Conan the Barbarian. I'm so excited to catch up with this. I've been so excited to get to talk to you about it. I think Jim Zub is writing Conan for the ages. I don't know if anybody ever since his big comeback after Dark Horse had him and Marvel has written him as well as Jim Zub does. The captions, the prose, it's just so strong. And Zub really understands how to mix in elements of the supernatural while still keeping Conan himself grounded. And I think that's the hallmark of a really good Conan story. There's only so many people you can see him slash down before you need like other elements. I will say the art on this has been so consistently classic looking, especially with Robert De La Torre and Dean White on it. This has Danica Brine as the artist, colored by João Canola. And I think it's not the art itself, but the colors. This is just looking like any other comic to me. It just looks like any comic I can get from any publisher. The colors are very modern and bright. They're very saturated. There's, not a lot of reflections, but there's like tones on things and lighter tones. I want this comic to look like it's from the 70s and 80s. And I think to this point on previous arcs, Titan has really nailed that with a few different people that they've had as artists on the comic. This one is not really getting there for me. It was an interesting story about Conan and Bali, or is it Bali? I assume it's Bali, but I don't know. But about them stealing this artifact. I mean, it's got decent action. It's interesting. I enjoyed it. But to me, the art is so much of what I really love about this. And in addition to Zub's narration, and to me, this issue's art just didn't hold up. I would say everybody, if you like Conan even a little, if you're Conan curious and you thought maybe I'll enjoy this character, I think the first 4 issues of this Titan Comics run that started in 2023 is one of the best Conan stories ever done, just from a narration standpoint, a tension standpoint, an art standpoint, a color standpoint. The letters are really good. I strongly recommend that. So I'm excited to finally get to talk to you about Conan and be caught up, even if this particular issue was not my favorite. Oh, Lordy. Well, the positive thing about Daredevil is that there's only 1 issue left of this 19 issue initial arc, because this is issue 18. Wild to think how much Conan has done in 18 issues compared to Daredevil, which has barely done anything. And this issue was the king of not doing anything, because even after reading it and then I went back through it again to try to say like, what happened here? I don't know that anything did. So this is by Salon and Ahmed. It's by Aaron Cooter on art, Jesus Abertov on colors, and Clayton Cowles on letters. Basically, Foggy is still possessed by pride, and so he's determined to like beat Matt in court, and he kicks Matt's butt in court, which Foggy might be able to do anyway, because he always says Foggy's the better lawyer. But then the resolution of this whole pride thing, which has been going on forever, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, is Matt basically says to Foggy, you're right, you were better all along. And this somehow defeats pride, and then pride goes running away, and Matt doesn't do anything about it. And then we go back to this wolf that's wrath. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no true agency that any of the characters have in the story. There's no stakes. We're repeating beats that have happened over and over again. And we're at 19 issues. Issue 19 is going to resolve this. I don't understand why. What was the point? Like, I understand why this plot happened and how it emerged from Chip Zdarsky's run. But to take 19 issues, which is like half of Zdarsky's whole run, or maybe like a third, to tell this one story about Daredevil versus the 7 deadly sins, like what was the reason that this story needed to be elevated to that level? I don't know that this comic ever made that case. And I'm regretful of that, because this is breaking the streak of basically unbroken excellence for Daredevil that has existed through his history since 1998 and moving forward. But this particular one, it just doesn't sing, unfortunately. So no harm to you if you like it. I don't know if I can really find anything positive to say about that issue. And then this, Daredevil Unleash Hell, is a Red Band book, so it's only coming out physically. So I'm not going to get to read it until the trade comes out, and hopefully the trade will come out digitally. And then I guess I'm going to buy the digital trade because I can't buy the digital single issues. I've not been reading DC Horror Creature Commandos by David Dalmatian because it seems like maybe it's in continuity, but it just didn't really ring my bell that much. But I did read Deadly Tales of Gunslinger Spawn. Here's the thing. I guess I got to turn on the timer. This whole issue is predicated on the idea that violence towards women is haha funny. I'll qualify that. I think a thing that certain very rough and tough authors like to do is to make the women seem deadly so that there's a reason for the male characters to fight the women. And that is equal opportunity. And Jim Zub does that very well in Conan. But this book makes all the women sex workers, but they're also vampires, and then focus on really, really graphic murder of all of them for a whole issue. And I know that there's readers out there that are going to enjoy that. And I know that there's watchers of the show that's going to enjoy that. And I don't dispute that you should enjoy it, because if you just like bloody comics that have a little bit of transgressive qualities, then more power to you. But I just don't know that I need a whole series that's hung on women being denigrated. And that's what every issue of this has been so far. It's what his origin is. It's what every woman character that walks onto the screen or the panel gets threatened with. And after 3 issues, I just think that Jimmy Palmiotti wants to write basically like a rape porn book with art from Patrick Reynolds and colored by Louis Nicht and letters by Tom Orzechowski. And I don't know if I can read another issue, unfortunately. And it's not just about sexual violence. I mean, this didn't have any sexual violence in it other than the implication that they were maybe lesser than in the community because they were sex workers. Although some good things were said about them. But it was the way that violence was able to be visited upon them in abandon because they were bad and vampires, that like even if at their funeral you have a character be like, well, they were really nice to people of all colors in this town, like I don't think that excuses the glee with which you said, ooh, we can be super violent towards these particular women characters because they were sex workers and people will like get off on that somehow. So I actually find it really, really disturbing. That's the one thing that can turn me off of a writer. Like I don't really care about who they are, what they're, I'm very good at separating the art from the artist, but when all of the art I see from the artist is like really, really disturbingly violent towards women. Even Jimmy Palmiotti, I have no knowledge of him. He might be the nicest human being who's ever existed. But when I read like 8 comics in a row that have that kind of vibe, then I start to be like, I don't want to let that into my life any bit more. And that's how I also feel about Phil Kennedy Johnson often. This looked really fun. Dinosaurs versus Cowboys. It's by this new comic publisher, at least new to me, called Scratch Comics. I think they were also the one of that horror anthology we passed a few letters back. But I just didn't get far enough to even look to see if it was on Global Comics or not. So I do not know. Let me just check in on how the chat is doing. We had some comments on Daredevil with Max saying it was really bad and really boring, but there was a background gag in a panel where Pride walks away and then gets startled by a barking lapdog that made me laugh. But that was the panel that I was like, wow, I like what that's it. We're just gonna let Pride just like run away in the background of a panel, and that's the story. James Abel read Catwoman. We already did that one. Lance McNair saying he thinks that G. Willow Wilson should have a Catwoman run. I do think G. Willow Wilson would write an excellent Catwoman, but G. Willow Wilson really writes an excellent just about anything. Neil Pereira, Savage Sword magazine Conan has been so good. I've not read Savage Sword yet because I just needed to get caught up on this main title, but I will probably read Savage Sword when the next one comes out. Tim Burnham, our resident Daredevil expert, says this was Aaron Cooter's last issue on art for DD. Such a strange time for this title. Hopefully the art duties will gain some consistency. Yeah, I think having constantly rotating artists really hurt this. I think it made sense when it looked like it was going to be one artist per Deadly Sin, and then that didn't actually wind up happening. Tim also saying that his copy of Daredevil Unleash Hell was shorted at the local comic shop, so that'll be read later for him as well. Yeah, for people who buy physical, what has the buying experience been for these Red Band comics specifically, are comic stores stocking them on the shelf? Like, do you see them out there, and are they trying to sell them on the strength of the polybags or not? So since we're already breaking, why don't I stop that screen share and we'll just catch a couple of other comments, and then we'll go back and continue. Do I ever dream about writing or editing for the big two? Editing, absolutely, yeah. You know, I often share, I went to college with several comic editors, one of whom is working at Marvel right now, actually, and who I had like classes with, and another which is no longer a Marvel editor, but I still talk to online from time to time. Neither of them were people I'm particularly close with, but they're like people that I had theater classes with. You know, and I sometimes look back and I think, oh, I just made my chair fall. I sometimes look back and think, should I have like gone out for those jobs? Because I certainly was very qualified with the degree that I had and the work experience that I had. But I don't like New York. And they were all, this was long before the world of remote. So it was like, oh, to move to New York, and they did not pay a lot of money. And I was just like, nothing about that was alluring to me. And I wasn't even reading comics at that point. But I remember looking at the job postings. Now I'm like, oh, you missed your shot. I think I would really enjoy learning to edit. I think if anybody out there is doing an indie comic and they wanted somebody to just kind of ride along as an editor, both of their grammar and of the structure of the comic, I would love to give that a try. I have this great book over here, Filth and Grammar, which is the comic book editor's secret handbook by Shelley Bond, who's steered Vertigo for many, many years. And I haven't read the whole thing, but I got it particularly because I really do like editing. And I do a lot of editing and editorial calendaring in my professional life. So I think I would probably really enjoy that professionally. I don't know if I could ever want to write somebody's IP other than my own. I'm very fiercely independent. I think you see that in a lot of the decisions I make and things that I say, which I blame Ani DeFranco, for those of you who were around the 90s. So I don't know if I'd ever want to write a big two comic, but I think I would enjoy editing an indie comic or Spawn, you know, if Todd wants to hire me. And hopefully that'll be something that I get to do at some point, right? Matt Hawk saying dehumanizing people is a terrible trait in fiction, way worse in real life. Well, both are pretty damn bad. I think dehumanizing people in fiction paves the way to dehumanize them in real life. And I want to make clear, the sex workers were only killed because they were vampires. But I just think for that to happen after 2 other issues of violence against women just made me feel a certain kind of way. Kenneth Carroll is behind reading your books for 2 weeks. Oh boy, well then you must be very busy because you are a very dedicated comic reader, Kenneth. Max Appelman, yes, several issues of Set Up for Pride only to kind of cruise off in the background. Just looked in Dinosaurs versus Cowboys #1 is on Global Comics. Well, I will read it and we'll have it in the regrets section next week of things that I regret having missed. Tim Burnham saying the most positive thing I can say about Daredevil 18. See, we're going to get one positive in, is that when Foggy was looking sharp when possessed by pride, but then went back to appearing sort of schlubby afterwards. Yeah, I mean, Cooter's a great artist. It doesn't surprise me that Cooter found interesting things to do with Foggy's transformation. I would someday Gail Simone to write a run of Supergirl, where how about Supergirl is about to be written by Sophie Campbell, who I didn't really like on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I think really could be good on Supergirl, not just because she's a woman, but because I just think the vibe that she has, to me, works better for Supergirl maybe than it does for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. The Phenomenal AC saying everybody should smash that like button, you know, click buttons, indicate your love or like or trust or affection. But you know, it's funny because 2 things happen there, right? I do like if you're subscribed, because that's how you can know if the show is happening. But then when people interact with the video, it does help the video spread wider. Do I want the video to spread wider? Yeah, it would be nice if more people were watching. I would enjoy that. But it's such a community thing that it's so hard to think about some random person seeing the video and clicking on it and then being like, whoa, you're cool, I'm going to start watching this. Like, it's so strange because I feel like all of you know me either from the website or from groups we've been in, or from Near Mint Conditions. So the idea that there's going to be some random person arriving and then liking me through YouTube is like so hard to imagine. But yes, click like, subscribe, smash, love. Tim Burnham, the Daredevil run has reinforced his belief that Marco Cicchetto is an unreal machine in his production consistency. We as readers were spoiled by his output on his Roman Zdarsky. I'm happy that I've been in the corner of Cicchetto ever since he did that Daredevil Spider-Man Punisher crossover back in like 2010. I want to say that was you know, because you remember it. I saw the art in that and I was like, no, there's nobody who can do this. No one else in comics draws like this. And ever since then, I've been a Marco Cicchetto fan. Says Mirth has always thought, at least nowadays, people write for the big two to get their name out and then write their own creations. Well, I think it's a circle of life to get noticed by the big two. I mean, big two are not going to hire you if you've got like one webcomic. People would love that. Big two, it'd be fun to do a graph of every writer that's currently writing for Big Two and draw where they came into Big Two and like what they had done immediately before that. Stephanie Phillips came in because she had a lot of hit indie series and was working her butt off on indie series, right? Steve Fox had been doing YA graphic novels to the point that he got to do some Marvel YA graphic novels out of continuity, and then they pulled him in. So it's really interesting to see how people get fed in to the system. DC right now is not a lot of newer writers. It's a lot of people they picked up from Marvel, because a lot of people defected from Marvel to DC. So it's really interesting to look at that. And yeah, I agree. Once somebody's a name seller and they know they can sell on their own, then they can go back to the indies and pitch their stuff with better luck. But I think for anybody who loves the American floppy comic medium, it's really hard to turn down the idea of getting to play with the toys in those IP toy boxes. So even somebody who has 100 indie series that they want to do, I'm sure it's very attractive to them to work at the Big Two. Bunkmaster, catch all on the replay. Wanted to jump in and remind everybody to like the video. Everybody wants you to like me. It's like, you know, you're trying to get me to give the Sally Field Oscar speech. Lance McNair saying, wanted to follow up on the Avatar question by saying, I'm also a bigger Korra fan. Lance and I agree on so much. I find Korra the more relatable Avatar in the show at higher highs than the original. Completely agree. Cosign, total cosign. Carlos Arguelles, I only speak French, so I tend to say things the way a French pronunciation would say them. Do you think the X-Force Omnibus by Craig Kyle and Kirstios will ever happen? That is one of the biggest piles of money that Marvel refuses to touch. And I think based on how much X-Men has been released, that they're going to have to finally touch one of those golden eggs next year, either that or Mike Carey, because they're running out of other stuff to put in Omnibus. But also, I feel like I read somewhere this weekend that Brevoort in the current X-Men line is really trying to have them be like no kill, like all mutants are no kill, which is why X-Force has been so bland, but we'll get to that. So maybe we're not going to, maybe that's like a Disney directive. They don't want like as many mutants killing and stabbing things for this next little while as we build up to mutants kind of going public. So maybe there's like a embargo against us getting that omnibus. I don't know. The Phenomenal AC, don't forget Peter's website for reading orders. 100 is immensely helpful if you're trying to figure out where to go next. Yeah, ostensibly, this whole stream is just a commercial for crushingcrisis.com because there's so many reading orders there for so many characters, and sometimes I use them. Like sometimes I forget that I've got a reading order for something and I'm like, oh, where was that character next? And I'm like, oh, you know the answer to that because you made a reading order that took 24 hours to make to do that. So please do. I mean, I want you to use them. I don't want to. It's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine in New Zealand that sells things on the internet and is very successful at that. And I'm like, I don't really sell things. I provide knowledge, which sometimes people exchange money to me as a thank you, you know, to subscribe to my knowledge giving. But it's interesting because I don't really think of Crushing Crisis as a product. It's a thing that's meant to help you. And so if you're like I don't expect that Omar needs to use Crushing Crisis a lot because Omar knows this stuff like the back of his hand, but he does still check it from time to time. So it's funny, like I would never press Crushing Crisis on you. So I'm like, well, if you know what you're reading and you're enjoying your reading, then you don't need it. But I just think there's so many details that get lost, even on a site like League of Comic Book Geeks, about like, where is a good place to pick up this run? Where is this collected? You know, did that character appear somewhere else while they were appearing here? And that's why I continue to do Crushing Crisis. It's hard to think of any site that I could read that would answer all the questions that I have as a reader in the way that I answer them for myself by doing Crushing Crisis. And so that's why it continues to exist. Tim Burnham, during the Wade run, that Chichetto thing that I'm talking about. Fun fact, Chichetto first worked on Daredevil even farther back during Shadowland as a fill-in artist, which I'm sure I've read, but I do not remember distinctly. All right, we're going to get back to the books after this one. I pronounced my name correctly. Oh, but now I'll never remember which version of the correct name I did. Probably with the Y sound, the Carlos Arguelles. But the funny thing is that another for Spanish, not French. Okay. And then Logan Wayne. Wait, does that no kill thing mean that no X-Men characters can be killed off or that they're not allowed to kill bad guys? Well, we had a character killed off, so I think bad guys. I didn't source this, so I don't know if it's real. But the implication that I got was that there was a feeling that during Krakoa, they got too unrelatable because they were too against the humans, which is really funny because if you're going to do a mutant metaphor about X-Men, like we have to be able to see them as separatists and not always demonize the separatists among them, which is what Krakoa did, but that was too unpalatable for a lot of the readership. So I get the feeling that Brevoort, possibly from on higher from Disney, but this is pure personal speculation, has been like the mutants cannot be indiscriminately killing people. They have to start feeling bad about killing people again. And I think that's very reflected on the run because I don't think anybody's killed anybody in any of the X-Men books so far. Usually there's at least one or two books that are a little bit more brutal, but not right now. Okay, let's get back to the book, shall we? Thanks everybody for chiming in with those questions and comments. You'll notice I'm trying to keep this kind of moving along a little bit more of a clip. I want to get to every one of your comments and interact with them all. At the same time, I was looking back at last week's video when I put in the minute markers, and it was like, every time I went and did comics, it was comments. I said comics instead of comments, drink. Every time I went back and did comments, it was like 30 minutes. So there's got to be a way that it moves a little bit more smoothly, and hopefully a way that I can make sure that you're not all waiting as long for me to acknowledge you. Okay, Luana Vecchio's Doll Parts, A Lovesick's Tale. This is the book that I dropped because I found it was so disturbing, and not disturbing in a way like just violence against women. Just every single theme of this comic was so disturbing. And then I said it on stream, and then somebody on the stream was like, oh, I went and read it. It turned out to be great for me. So see, I am connecting people with books. It's magic. But this is specifically the origin of this serial killer, this BDSM serial killer that's in Doll Parts, and it kind of explains how she got that way. So it's not for me, but it's really well drawn. Disturbing things. Doom Academy was my #1 most anticipated book of the week from Marvel this week. Did it stand up to that anticipation? It's by Mackenzie Cadenhead. I didn't even have the time to Google who that is. I think they must come from YA, because this was paced in such an accessible YA boarding school book kind of way that I loved it. And Pasquale Ferry on art, Edgar Delgado, still the color artist on this whole series, and Clayton Cowles on letters. And here's what I mean. The original Strange Academy, I grew to love it, but Scotty Young is a comics author primarily, and I think he threw so many things at us so at once, and we didn't have time to really get to know and love each of the characters, that over time and by attrition, I did grow to love all of them, and I really did like that book. But I do think that it didn't start in the way that a book with a big cast like this should start. And I think that people who come from YA novels understand that, because they understand that there's a certain rhythm to getting kids into it. And I think this book understood it. So the kids are in Latveria. They've been kind of adopted by Doom. Kind of weird that Dr. Voodoo went along with them. That kind of surprised me. But this focuses really only on 2 of the main kids, Zoe and Doyle, and a little bit on Shaylee, as they kind of get acclimated and think like, well, maybe we'll be able to do good things at this Doom Academy. This was not like a knockdown, drag out, perfect, amazing comic book, but to me, it focused on the right stuff. It focuses on moving in, getting acclimated, learning that the students at Doom Academy, which already existed, are very different than the typical students at Strange Academy, and also getting involved in extracurricular activities. It was really cute, and it just felt like a school book that was easing me in. Felt like more like how an indie comic would get us into a superhero school book, rather than Marvel doing and kind of throwing the whole kitchen sink at us all at once. This is Keenspot, Died Hard. I'm not reading a Keenspot comic until one of you tells me you've read a Keenspot comic. And I know I'm the one who says I'm going to read everything, but I don't even believe they're real. I honestly just think that they put out covers, and there's just an elaborate game to mess with me specifically. So once I've heard that one of you have pulled a Keenspot comic, then I will start trying to chase down Keenspot comics. Epitaphs from the Abyss is one of the 2 anthology books from Oni Press, doing their subline of EC Comics. This is the horror one. I don't really have a lot of affinity for horror anthology, so I have not been picking that up, which brings us to Exceptional X-Men by Dr. Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero on art, colors by Nolan Woodard, and letters by Travis Lanham. This is New Mutants. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to say it. There's 3 New Mutants, and this book is very much following them with just little moments for Emma and Kitty, and a little bit for Iceman, and I think that's fine. I just think that it's just so slow, and the issues don't feel really complete to me, even though they're gorgeous. And this issue, which follows one of our characters, Axo, as he gets involved with somebody who's doing genetic testing so that people can maybe eventually find a cure for their mutation. It just feels like we've done that story so many times already. And I don't know that the way that he interacts with the story in this issue leverages his uniqueness as a character enough for me to care that we're doing it again. I think of these 3 characters, the character with the purple hair, Bronze, feels like the most unique character that we really haven't seen before in an X-Men book. Not just because her hair is purple, but because of her attitude, because of her personality. I feel like the other 2 characters, Axo and Melee, it just feels like we could do this with mutants we have already. I want to love this book, because I like Eve Ewing's writing, I like Carmen Carnero's art, but it's just not about anything to me. And I just think in this world with so many good comics, where I can read 50 comics in a week and so many of them can be enjoyable, I think your comic needs to be about something. I don't think having the X-Men name on it is enough anymore for me. I'm just going to look in the chat, because I know a few of you will have had opinions on Exceptional X-Men. James Abel says the Chobs part didn't work for me. Yeah, Xeno seems like Mr. Sinister. Did this line from Kitty, are we capable of normalcy? Can we be normal people? Are we poison? Oh, did like that line. Yeah, the whole like we're getting jobs, not only did it feel so abrupt and just in service of being able to do this one specific plot beat, but it feels like we just saw that in the Champions, which Eve Ewing also wrote for a little while. So I was like, is this the only beat that you're ever going to do with young characters? Also, James Abel on Doom Academy is saying the voices of a good book will keep you up at night and travel with you to an unknown location. You're a poet, James. The one world under Doom elements didn't add anything to the story. But I agree. I don't really think it has to be One World Under Doom. I think it would have been better if it came out before One World Under Doom, because they were already with Doom at the end of Blood Hunt. But I guess they wanted to like wait for the promotional tie-in of it. But it actually feels like it should have been a prelude to One World Under Doom. One Wheelchair X says really exceptional is New Mutants, and MYX should have been called Generation X. We all knew this. And Lance McNair says the oversimplification, but the challenge of long-running IP is pleasing the fans who enjoy the change while also pleasing those who want more of the status quo, which we talked about in our Moment of Krisis last week. Speaking of existing IP, speaking of a book that this just missed the top 10. I'm obsessed with this. It's Flash Gordon number 6. It's from Mad Cave. If you have no idea who Flash Gordon is, it doesn't matter. The first issue is so perfectly outlined, you won't have any questions. Jeremy Adams, who is the writer of Green Lantern and now Aquaman, is the one writing it. I love what he's writing. It doesn't just feel like another one of books. It feels very specific. And Will Conrad is one of my favorite artists. I've loved him ever since he was one of the artists in X-Men 2010. I think he looks like a cleaner lined version of Mike Diodato, and I could read anything by him. And he's drawing this book so well. I think it's so gorgeous. He's actually alternating a couple of pages per issue with Cliff Richards, and honestly I couldn't even tell where the switch happened this issue, which is possibly down to the colors from Lee Lottridge. Also really good letters from Taylor Esposito. So Flash Gordon is like a pulp hero that's adventuring through the universe, and he's always facing off against this bad guy, Ming. And what this sets up is that both of them are presumed dead at the beginning of the book, which allows all of their past adventures to have existed, but then they've to briefly work together to kind of get back to where they are. And so you have Ming being like, well, do I want my chief nemesis to get back to being my chief nemesis? And you have Flash being like, do I want to like have this autocratic despot be reinstalled just so I can be back in the universe and have my adventures again? Which is they don't come right out and monologue about that, but it's a really interesting beat to play. And I think it makes this comic really, really good. And I just think it's a great comic. If you like sci-fi space adventure that has a little hint of Star Wars, a little hint of John Carter of Mars, a little hint of pulpy action, I think every issue of this has just been incredible. Totally incredible. The only reason it's not in the top 10 is this is like a little bit of like a softer in between, like let's throw our hero into peril issue after some really good plot issues. So it's just like a little softer for me than how good some of the previous ones have been. And that's why it's not in the top 10 as a series, but still one of my favorite series running right now. Free Agents. I'll put the timer up, but I didn't read this issue. I thought I was going to love this. It's Kurt Busiek and Fabian Nicieza. Like, come on, y'all. And it's one of these things that I love. It plays with the trope of like a bunch of heroes that already existed that get pulled into a different universe. And that universe they get pulled into is the Image Comics universe. So like, cool, right? Like, I love things that are in the Image Comics continuity. I was so bored. I think I read the first 3 issues. It was so boring. It's like, how do you make a book about 10 characters who are a paramilitary squad who's come from another universe to our universe so dull? And I think the problem is, again, 10, more information than we can hold in our little brains all at one time. I don't think any one of them was the focus character. One of them kind of sort of was, but then she's not even on their first mission in the issue number 2. So there was nobody to focus on. And it's kind of amorphous and unclear why they're still in our reality. And it's amorphous and unclear why they're even still working together in our reality. And it's amorphous and unclear if we're ever going to meet other Image heroes or if we're just going to joke about how, oh, is that Cyberforce? So it just felt like we got 3 issues in and there was no point. And I didn't have any character to like. I think you really, even in a team book, and Busiek and Nicieza are masters of this, but maybe they're maybe 2 masters is too many. Maybe they're canceling out each other's masterness, because it just, I had to drop it. It was just making me so frustrated and so annoyed that I really just couldn't get into it at all. So yeah, there you go. The Brood, I also haven't been reading this. It's from the World of Minor Threats. I keep saying, what is Minor Threats? Nobody in the chat seems to know. So eventually I'll find out, but we're not there yet. Okay, G.I. Joe. This cover, y'all, look at this freaking cover. Look at that. I want the toy of every single thing on that cover. This book by Joshua Williamson is, you know, he's kind of in his let's just get her done mode. The issues are going by so fast. And even though they're great and they're structured really well, because Larry Hama is killing it so hard in the other G.I. Joe continuity and Real American Hero, it makes it a little hard to get into. But also, we're on issue 4, and I think the challenge I'm having with this, which is good, it's fundamentally a fun comic book. And if you don't want to get into 310 issues of Real American Hero continuity, you can just pick this up from number 1, or you could read the 4 miniseries that came out last year before it, Duke, Cobra Commander, Scarlet, and Destro, and then appreciate this even more deeply. But the problem is that Cobra, as we see on this cover, is so immediately more toyetic that, of course, when you put a Cobra Bat or Cobra Commander on, or Destro on the panel, they're immediately compelling because we immediately know who they are. They're like superheroes because they have that specific iconic look. The Joes are not like that, and I find the problem is that it's so hard to differentiate the Joes from each other, not only visually, but in a way that makes it exciting to root for them. So I always am having more fun when we're spending time with Cobra, which is fine. Cobra's a huge part of G.I. Joe, but I just think that we need to do a little bit more to make the G.I. Joes themselves like a little bit more exciting and fun to root for. Right now, Baroness is with the G.I. Joes, and that's my favorite part of it because Baroness is easily visually identifiable and she's a villain, and it's fun to root for her, which makes me even less interested in the other Joes because I'm mostly reading them for a villain. I did also read Kelly Thompson's Scarlet series, which I somehow had not read despite loving Kelly Thompson, which was so good. The story, I didn't love the art, but the story was so good. And it was so G.I. Joey. Like Scarlet was so visually distinct. The other hero characters were so interesting and visually distinct that I was like, yeah, like I really can root for them and I want them to be in interesting situations and I can like get interested in their personalities because they were tangible, identifiable. And I just feel like other than Duke, I couldn't even tell you, I think CoverGirl's in there somewhere. I couldn't even tell you the names of the other G.I. Joes that are in this comic right now because again, not because there's too many of them. And I know these characters extremely well because they just don't feel significant and differentiated. So it's a fine run. It's a good run. I think Tom Riley's art is really good. Jordi Belaire's color is always awesome. I just think it hasn't really found what's interesting about the G.I. Joes yet. Godzilla Heist, you know, I almost skipped this because I'm like, heist books, Godzilla, this is so not my thing. But I said, you know what? The show, it's about challenging me to go out of my comfort zone. So this story by Van Jensen with art by Kelsey Ramsey, colors by Heather Breckel, and letters and design from Sandy Tanaka. You know what? I read it. And I'm truly happy that I did. I have to start with the art. I don't love this Kelly Ramsey art. It's vague. I know you're looking at he has face. Like he's got no feet. It's just so vague. It almost looks like lines are like melting away at the edges, but I do think the colors do a good job on this, and it shows the strength of a colorist like Heather Breckel to like really go in with vivid hues. Like if you're going to really lose a little bit of his leg and his foot there, make sure that we can really see the leg colored in. Make sure the foot is much darker in contrast to the leg. Give us the details so the lines that are there pop out. I think very similar to how Mike Spicer colors Daniel Warren Johnson. The concept of this book is freaking hilarious. Basically, there's this guy who's a failed weatherman who has figured out what Godzilla is attracted to, but rather than use that to keep Godzilla away from death and destruction, this guy has no ethics. So he's using it to create death and destruction so he can slip in and do crime. And so he gets kind of got by a bigger crime crew who's like, well, why don't you help us use Godzilla to do some crimes all together? We could do bigger gigs together. Totally hooked. Complete. They got me hooked right in mouth. I'm there. Even though I don't love the art, I just think the concept is so wickedly, hilariously amazing that I am absolutely hooked, and I'm absolutely going to keep reading it. James Abel read it and said some major kaiju score vibe to it. The artwork seemed to have a type of film grain over it. That's a good way to say it. And I'm interested to see where this is going. A couple of issues ago, Dr. Zero said I couldn't make it halfway through the second issue of Free Agents. Had such high hope for that creative team. Same for me. Same from me. Seems like the video was kind of lagging for a second, but then it fixed itself. So we're just going to keep going. There's another brand new series, The Hive. It was supposed to happen last week, but then it got delayed. And so I think some stores got it, but they held back the digital issue for this week. It is a story from AJ Lieberman, artwork by Mike Henderson, colors from Inazi Piazzu, and also letters. I've been trashing Mike Henderson on cable. I think he works so much better here. To me, Mike Henderson is great at these modern day books that are easy and breezy, where he doesn't have to be on model for a specific existing character, that his characters have a model and you can differentiate them from each other. That said, this plot from AJ Lieberman is trying to do way too much. There's a crime ring, and then there's like a sex cult ring, and then there's bees that are maybe controlling people, and there's the queen of the hive, and she's the queen of the hive of the crime ring and the sex cult ring, but also does she speak to bees? It's too much of a fractured narrative, no central character to understand or to root for, and I honestly couldn't tell you what happened in this issue, so there's no reason for me to keep reading number 2. And I get, let people do their art, man, let people be weirdos, but I'm just saying, a number 1 comic is a very specific art form, and you got to either leave people with characters they're rooting for or rooting against, or really deep questions. And I finished this issue and I was like, okay, that was fine. It could have been a one-shot. And that is the death knell of a number 1 comic. You do not want to leave people thinking this could have been a one-shot. This is the Holy Roller. I read the first issue of this. It's so weird. It's by Andy Samberg. Yes, that one from Saturday Night Live and Brooklyn 99. Joe Troman, who is the guitarist whose name you don't know from Fall Out Boy. So not Patrick Stump, not Pete Wentz, but the other one is Joe Troman. And then Rick Remender with Roland Boschi on art. Some of the best art I've actually seen from Roland Boschi. It just wasn't for me. Oh, and this is the final issue, 9 of 9. I don't even think I realized it was the final issue, but I only read issue 1 of 9. It was, I guess I'm going to start the timer. Because I think some of you would really like this book, even though it wasn't for me. The reason I think you would like it is it's grounded in small town America with this guy who wants to get out of a small town because all that ever happened in the small town is his dad who was good at bowling. And he's like, life has got to be more than that. So he leaves and he does Greenpeace for 20 years. And then his dad is dying. And so he goes back home. And the dad is dying thing is like minor in the scope of things. He just realizes that now he has all of this worldly knowledge and he's going to stand up a little taller to the BS that the little town puts him through. And also some themes that are very resonant with today's America. Like, is he going to stand up for the racism? And he's a Jewish character. Is he going to stand up to the anti-Semitic hate that he stood up to or just let pass by as a kid? Is he going to do something about it now? And so he becomes a vigilante wielding his dad's bowling ball. And that's not a huge spoiler. I think it's all the premise of the series. If that sounds fun to you, and that very kind of low super approach to vigilantism and the idea that it's very reflective of, wouldn't it be nice to go back to your community and stand up for things that you didn't stand up for in the past? I think it will really hit for you. I think that Sandberg and Troman have a really good rhythm of the dialogue. I think sometimes it leans a little bit funny in a way that you can tell that Andy Samberg and Troman are writing it for somebody funny in their life, like somebody on SNL or somebody, Patrick Stump, who's very amusing from Fall Out Boy. And you can almost like hear that they're writing it for somebody funny to say. And then as dialogue, it's like not as funny without somebody to give you the line read. But I still thought it was good. And it was distinctly different than a Remender book. Like Remender is writing along as a co-writer, but it does not feel typical Remender. It really feels different than that. So if all that sounds interesting to you, I really encourage you to check it out. It just wasn't perfectly in my strike zone, but it was a perfectly good book that I think a lot of people would really like. Hour of the Wolf, I dropped a little while ago. Again, I read issue 1. I couldn't tell what it was about. There's only so much time in the day. House of Slaughter. Finally, I get to talk about Something's Killing the Children books. Although I guess I just talked about that one shot a couple weeks ago. So House of Slaughter is the B book to Something is Killing the Children. The main book tells a specific narrative. This book tells like kind of legends and sub characters from the House of Slaughter. And even though Tinian has the top billing here, he's never the writer. He's just concept spy. So the writer here is Sam Johns with illustrations from Letizia Candonici, which looks just like the art of Werther Dell'Edera in the main series. So it was like, I couldn't even believe it wasn't him. Colors by Francesco Segala and letters from Justin Birch. You cannot jump in on this arc, which started with issue 26, and this was the final issue. You absolutely can't, because it was predicated heavily on some earlier arcs from the series, and it was basically like, let's take two people who are deeply neurodivergent from each other and in general, and show them trying to communicate and how much trouble they have communicating, which is really an interesting concept. And I think it was fun to read as somebody who is neurodivergent, but at points I'm like, can we please like not do another issue of them talking past each other and get to the actual plot? Well, this issue did get to the plot, and it was actually really fascinating. I'm glad I hung in. But this series, it's much slower and longer than the main Something's Killing the Children series, which I think works, because that series I sometimes read an issue in like 2 minutes, and that's too short to have to have spent $4 on a comic and read it in 2 minutes. But this issue and this book, I tend to read 10-15 minutes per issue. I think you have to at least be aware of the main Something's Killing the Children to have an appreciation for this series. But once you do, I think then you can keep reading the series and you don't have to be keeping up with the current events and something is killing the children. I will say the first arc of this by Tate Bromball is amazing. Then after that, your mileage will vary. I don't think that this arc is good enough that I'm going to go and recommend that you keep up with the book, but I do think the first arc, if you read a little bit of Something is Killing the Children and you want to see the focus be on somebody other than Erica Slaughter, the first arc of this is really, really great. I'm not reading Howl from Ahoy Comics. I did, however, decide to read Huge Detective. It was the last thing I read this morning that I made it so that I could not get to 2000 AD. Written by Adam Rose, art by Magenta King, colors by King and also Minimone, and letters from DC Hopkins. This is a sleeper hit. You've got to go find this and you've got to read it. I got it on Amazon, not even thinking that it might be on Global Comics. So maybe it's on Global Comics. It introduces the idea that giants, like really big giants, have been living under Australia all this time, and they eventually come out. And this is all from the first few pages of issue 1. So they basically wipe out Australia. Everybody leaves Australia. So the giants live there, but the giants, after that initial burst of violence, are trying to live alongside human beings who they charmingly call beans, and not eat them, ideally. And so they're trying to send some best representatives of their people and their culture to the human world. And they have this one giant who's a detective. So he's a huge detective, and he's trying to help this police officer with a case that may or may not involve giants. It's structured so cleverly, and I think that's what I really love it. It's one of these things. Interesting big character, literally, because why is he leaving his home? Who is he? Interesting character in the detective, who's a totally messed up character. Why is she even agreeing to work with him? And then interesting case, and then interesting world concept of there's giants, but they're in the real world, and then a lot of interesting things in between. To me, that's what really hooks me on a book. So I have characters I care about getting issue to issue. There's a mystery carrying me from issue to issue. And this issue really progressed the mystery significantly, which I appreciated. The art is not the best art I've ever seen, but it's perfect for this book about weird giants and this weird detective on pills who's kind of ferrying the giants through the world. And it's just such a delightful marriage of concept and mystery. And I think the mystery in this, it gets a little wacky. If you were looking for a hard crime detective, it's not that. This definitely takes a little bit to the silly place, but it really kept me engaged. And I hoovered up all 4 issues in 35 minutes before the show today, and I cannot wait to read the next issue. Really, really fun series from Titan Comics. Speaking of things that this is the stuff I didn't think I was going to read and then didn't, then loved. This book in Bloom, this is number 11 for me this week. It's right outside of my top 10. This is so messed up. It's so messed up, and I love it. It's written by Michael Conrad, who I know is a collaborator with Becky Cloonan. They co-wrote Wonder Woman together, I think, with art by John J. Pearson, with artists from Lola Donato and letters by Pat Brousseau. I am obsessed with this comic book. So the idea is that it's typical Walking Dead, zombie, whatever, but the thing that happens that predicates that is that, hold on, I'm seeing lag, so I'm just going to pause until the lag resolves. All right, did the lag go away? Am I moving in real time again? Let's check the chat. Okay. Hey, Richard Fearing, I just saw you poke in. Okay, now I'm going to give myself 10 extra seconds on the clock and pick back up. That's when the lag started. So, there's a virus. In this case, it's a flower virus. So I guess that's that show you all like, The Last of Us. That's flower viruses, right? But not everybody dies. Some people just grow branches out of their heads or whatever. And so now, and everybody likes it. It's like the rapture. It's oh, when are you going to bloom, right? But there's some people who just don't, maybe because they're genetically or just not predisposed or whatever. So we were following a detective who didn't bloom, but he's investigating bloom crimes, and somebody's killing bloomed people, which is weird because everybody likes the bloomed people. And so it's creepy and horror. It's scary, but then it's also beautiful. I wish this issue had more beautiful blooms in it. It was a little on the creepier side, but the past 2 issues had such beautiful pages, and the mystery feels tangible. The detective character feels really distinct and individual, and he has a past with the bloom and why he's not blooming that is so credible and so tangible that it has that stack for me, right? Big concept, check. Character who I'm interested in following from issue to issue, check. Interesting middle doughy part that's a cool mystery, check. So I'm totally into it. Could not recommend it any more highly. If you like kind of Walking Dead, but with a twist, if you like the idea of flower infections, and if you like the idea of a mystery detective story within that world, this will absolutely hit for you. I have no doubt in my mind. I'm a little distracted by chat right now, so why don't I just catch up on some chat? Trying to do the chat and the books at the same time is tricky, not only because it divides my attention, but because then I'm trying to put them up while the books happen. But then if that happens during the next book, I don't want to put it up during that book, because then when I do the chapter more, anyway, you get it. So James Abel, Joe versus Cobra, who will win? Some good action scene. It's almost like a war movie. Yes. And then Dr. Zero, I think I highlighted already that he couldn't even make it through the second issue of Free Agents and had such high hopes for it. Completely agree. For Lance, G.I. Joe is largely a blind spot, but I want to get into it through the comics. Well, check out any of those miniseries. They don't have to be read sequentially. Check out Duke or Cobra Commander or Scarlet. I think Scarlet was the strongest one and a great intro because it assumes you know nothing. And Kelly Thompson clearly is obsessed with that character. She talks about that in her endnote. I think you could, and I think it would appeal to your tastes. So I think you could read that Scarlet miniseries, and which might be on Global Comics, and just get a general vibe for the world of G.I. Joe. And then if you like that, I think you could read Duke and Cobra Commander and get in like a little bit deeper. I think for somebody who's totally new to G.I. Joe, I don't know if I would suggest just picking up the 2024 volume. I think you need some background from the Duke series and the Cobra Commander series. I think if you had a concept of what G.I. Joe was already, then you could jump in. Not only because you know the characters already, but like the world would just make sense to you already. Okay. Yeah, the lag was happening, Cruel Angel, because Godzilla was too overwhelming for the computer to keep up with. Lance McNair had to leave early today to do some reading, but always listen to the replay of the rest. And Lance, you are such a fun person to get to talk to, and I love sharing your opinions on the screen. On the screen. James, the Media Master, says, Krisis, what are some X-Men runs or books that really got everything right? X-Men outside a handful of books feels so sterile right now. Well, I mean, I love Krakoa, but in terms of things that got really, really right, I think for me, it's that 2010 to 2012 period. I just think every book was hitting. Every book had a reason to exist, even though there was a huge amount of books on the line, especially after Schism. It just felt like you could go to every book and be like, well, that's what this book's about. That's what this book's about. You really can't go wrong. I love Uncanny in that period. I love New Mutants in that period. Generation Hope was really interesting. I think if you look in the Marvel Now period, Bendis's Uncanny had a really good characterization of the team. I think sometimes it got lost in its own plots, especially with the long-running S.H.I.E.L.D. plot and then the long-running Original Sin plot. Magneto by Colin Bunn was an excellent X-Men book in that period. I think Cable and X-Force by Dennis Hopeless was hugely overlooked. I think it's a really, really good execution of who Cable is at the core of his character, and then you can follow him into Cy Sperrier's Cable or X-Force book in 2014, which I think was a very good execution of X-Force, not in the Claws way, but in the led by Cable way. So I think there's a lot of gems in there. It's rare to get an X-Men period where it really feels like there's no gem, and it kind of feels like that's where we are right now. Storm is a gem. We'll get to it. But yeah, I think in any given line of X-Men books, there's almost always a gem, even if it's not the flagship. My big Mike Henderson fan, Tim Burnham, I didn't realize he had another book coming out. I have to give it a try and give it a look. Yeah, if you like Mike Henderson, the narrative is very fractured. It's very, very fractured. So much that even for me, who likes a fractured narrative, it was too much. But I do think Henderson's art in it was really great. It felt like his nail-biter art, but then even like a level up from there. Holy Roller kind of went off the rails for me. Oh, see, I only read issue 1, so I don't know if it went totally off the rails or not. And Blue 1 through 3 also in Global Comics, if anyone wants to read it. I need to, if I had more time before the stream, which maybe I will now that I've caught up on so many things, because I had more time this week, but then, well, you'll see. I spent a really long time on something I didn't need to spend time, and I caught up on Conan, and I caught up on House of Slaughter. So that ate up a lot of time. But I want to be able to just put up like a star or something when things are on Global Comics, because I'm not paid. They get at me for a sponsorship, Global Comics. But I just think so many of these books you can just go read for $8 a month or less on Global Comics. Like, oh my God, just do it. Every time I mention In Bloom, all I can hear is my head in Nirvana. Yeah, same. Next Imaginaut, fairly well to Lance McNair. Richard Fearing, the Energon universe has been a fun read. I agree. You know, I have a baseline skepticism about Kirkman because I don't always vibe with every Robert Kirkman comic, but I really think it's working together well. Like, it's a great example, and this is why I like shared universe of like editors got together and made it really, really work, and it hangs together well. The books complement each other well. Little things happening in one book make you go, oh, I remember hearing about that in the other book. And like, that's magic. And that takes a really good editor. I think the editing has been incredible. I think Skybound, something that people overlook about Skybound is that early on, Kirkman invested in good editing and made sure he had an editor, and then he had editors steering other books. So like Birthright has an editor, and the editor was the person who was on the letter columns. Sean Makovich was the editor of Birthright, and you can tell that Kirkman, even though he's indie, cares about having an editor that makes things all hold together, and that's why they're good for the Energon Hasbro contract. Whereas like Todd McFarlane doesn't always understand the power of an editor, which is why, Todd, you need me as your editor. But I don't think I think a lot of times you hear from Image people, whether they're doing shared universe or solo, that it had to be their choice if they wanted to bring in an editor. And I think that editors add so much to a comic book in the same way designers do, right? Book designers bring so much to a comic book, and people who know. Carlos Aguila is saying 2 omnibuses that he's looking forward to are Benjamin Percy's Wolverine and X-Force, but I think they'll likely come out in the relatively near future, given the releases. I think that X-Force omnibus is a no-brainer. It's got an easy name on it. It's got Joshua Cassaro on art, who everybody really likes, and it's like 50 issues plus an annual. I don't even think it crossed over with anything. Such an easy collection to do. And Richard Fearing, am I going to tune into Daredevil Born Again when it starts in a couple of weeks? I don't know if I'm going to watch it episode by episode. I don't have a lot of time in my life for that. Although I guess Severance will be done by then, but I probably will watch it because I did like the original Daredevil. I like a lot of those actors. Okay, let's get back to the comics. So I mentioned earlier that I was dropping a book for my mental health. It is Incredible Hulk. Cards on the Table did buy it this week and started reading it, and it made me so angry. I just can't anymore. We all know how I feel about it. We're on issue 22. Nothing's going to change. I think it's an art book. I think the art is fine. I hate every single decision Philip Kennedy Johnson is making about the plot and about this young character, Charlie. I'm happy to read it on Marvel Unlimited, but this has moved into the realm that Wonder Woman is in for me right now, which is I'm not going to pay and talk about it every week just to get angry. I know you all like seeing me get angry about certain books, but I just hate it too much, and it's bringing me down. It's not just like I'm not even angry for amusement. I'm like angry in a frustrated way, and I don't want to bring that energy to the stream. And Max Appleman, so Max will be commenting on Incredible Hulk on my behalf from here on out, and he says, LOL, silly body horror shit, I guess. Infinity Watch, what a strange little series with like no noise around it. This is so it's about all these humans who have the Infinity Stones, and it's Derek Landy, who I think writes really good team books. He is somebody who understands like how much can we remember about characters at any given time, and he does this thing where he only puts the focus on 2 or 3 of them at a time so we can like digest it. And he's done that in all of his Avengers books so far very, very effectively. I think this is really fun. If you like the Infinity Stones, if you like the idea of people wielding the Infinity Stones, and if you like the idea of every universe has its own set of Infinity Stones and they don't work in other universes, but it doesn't mean nobody covets them, this is really well done. The Rory Coleman art colored by Brian Reber was so good. I had to leave out pages. This was not the best page, but a lot of them were heavy spoilers and I didn't want to use them. And then for reasons that will become apparent, there's a whole second half of the story by a totally different artist, Enid Bellam. And that half of the issue is gorgeous as well. I just think this is doing, I can do alternate universe stuff when it's motivated from characters I care about and rooted there. And this has only a 6-character cast, easy to pay attention to. It is rooted in very specific motivations for them. And so I could follow why I should care about the alternate universe. This is a secret hit. I'm not saying it's like the best Marvel comic. It's not my top 10. I'm saying Marvel sometimes has small books that nobody's talking about that are really good, and they're secret because nobody talks about them. And to me, this book is one of those books. Yeah. Nick N says a huge fan of the Infinity Stones and worried to no, don't be worried. It's cool. It's cool, man. Everything's cool. I think it's cool. Okay. Moving on. We have Jenny Sparks, which I did not read because it is by Tom King. And it's also not in continuity. So why would I say my Catabasis is on Global Comics, but it's going up on Global Comics slower than it's coming out in physical. So only the first issue is up right now, which I loved. It's this like heaven hell assassin lady, totally into it. I already covered it in my previous stream, so I'm not going to go deep into it. But whenever issue 2 comes out in Global Comics, I will review it as a catch-up read. So then we come to King Spawn. And now that I'm totally caught up on the Spawn universe and totally immersed in the Spawn universe, I think I'm willing to say that let me think about the statement. This is the best Spawn book of in-universe Spawn. It's script and plot by Rory McConville and Todd McFarlane. Sometimes Todd just does a whole issue. Art by Yildiray Sinar, which is really good. Colors from Ivan Nunez, really good. Letters by Andworld Design. Here, I want to make a strong pitch for this book, because I've not only caught up on this current arc, but I read the whole first arc as I try to like close the gap in the middle. This is a book that cares that all the heaven and hell stuff is happening with Spawn, but it doesn't make you, it's not about Spawn just existing in this whole gods and demons, heaven, hell, Lucifer world that his main book is. It lets Spawn get focused on little stuff. The way that Spawn used to be focused on. The devil's heaven and hell thing was the thing that all of Spawn played up against, but he was thrashing people with chains in an alleyway. And I feel like the main Spawn book has lost that scope. This book has that scope because it's about demons who want to mess with Spawn specifically. They don't want to mess with all of heaven and hell. They want to make things bad for Spawn. And Spawn wants to make things bad for them. It's very readable. The art is really engaging. It's easy to understand the mission that Spawn is on, and it's easy to care about because it's specific to him, and it's not just this kind of unending big stakes game that the stakes are so big that you start to forget what the game even is. So I really like King Spawn. I'm not saying it's a great comic book that everybody will love. I'm saying if you have an existing affection or interest in Spawn, this is the Spawn book to just pick up. It's very pick upable. Even in the middle of an arc, it's very pick upable because it's easy to follow why he's angry at who he's angry at. But I really, really enjoy it. So now we come to Laura Kinney, Wolverine. This is by Erica Schultz, with art that I'm starting to really love by Giada Belviso, colors from Rachel Rosenberg, and letters from Corey Petit. Look, last time I whined. I did some whining about, like, is this just going to be X-23 and Daredevil team up? Maybe they should just have a book together. Well, guess what? They maybe should just have a book together, because I think Erica Schultz writes both of them pretty well. Their out of costume moments here were really funny, and they had two distinct personalities that like really worked with each other for me. Also, this is as close, it doesn't look like Chichetto, but it has that Chichetto energy to it, which I really appreciated. Yeah, I think this is good. But now we're getting in, I forget, there's some other characters going to team up with her next issue, and I just hate that cynical view that we always have to combine Laura with other people in order to get her book sold. But the thing I really did like about this is it was a very contained story. Issues 2 and 3 were a story. It was by itself. It was motivated by the story in issue number 1. But I think that Erica Schultz is a really smart writer, and she does things right on her Marvel books. She knows she might not have forever. There's no time to play out one of these 10, 20 issue arcs. Let's get some quick hits so people feel satisfied. And I felt very satisfied at the end of this issue. I feel like Laura's in good hands. I wish it wasn't all going to be team-uppy, but I also would not throw out a Wolverine and Daredevil book if it had Elektra and Laura as the Daredevil and Wolverine. I was thinking about reading, but I just didn't have enough time. So that's another reason I didn't read 2000 AD, The Loose End. I want to get back into some of these hard case crime books. Some of them tend to be really good, but you have to kind of dig for a while to figure out who the good ones are and the authors are. So I might just try a bunch of their number ones. Plus, we all know I'm a sucker for pink on a cover. Then we come to Miles Morales, Spider-Man. This is part of the Daredevil, or not Daredevil, I'm so sorry, the Deadpool crossover. This was fantastic. Amazing. Cody Ziegler, man, you're crushing it. Luigi Zergara, I don't know that artist, but his art on here, colored by Brian Valenza with letters from Corey Petit, it was so charming. I think he struggled for a second with out of mask Miles talking to Genke, but everything with Daredevil was so funny. He did the Daredevil mask so well. This little moment where Daredevil gets so excited and by Miles bringing out the sword, and he says, "A power sword, this crossover is finally paying off," and he gets little stars in his eyes, and his mouth is like all like, it's so clever. And this had a lot of back and forth action, which I don't really like always. Like Daredevil gets thrown this way, and then Miles thrown that way, and then Daredevil gets thrown again, or Daredevil, I keep saying Daredevil, Deadpool. But I really think that actually it worked. It really, really worked the whole time, and it was easy to follow. And that's a lot. It's a big achievement. And so I really, really loved that it was easy to follow. It was, oh boy, this is why my computer is slow. Some background process has been trying to run. Oh, usually I manage to murder them, but it's still happening even despite my murder. Speaking of murder, I love that the plot of this is that Daredevil and Kid Daredevil are trying to murder Miles, but both of them feel really bad about it, and they like don't actually want to do it. Love that plot beat. Think it's so, so clever. I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a second and try to resolve this background process that's running, because I think it's why we're lagging. So yeah, I really, really love it. Let's get some chat, shall we? James Abel saying, Laura Kinney, Wolverine, enjoying the Daredevil and Wolverine team up, and some of the art seemed to pop from the pages. When did Bucky change his name to Revolution? In one of the Thunderbolts comics. But yeah, Bucky is who that next team up is. Let me just really quick see if I can find this memory leak and kill it. So frustrating. Memory leak. Why are you dripping? What is your problem? Leave me alone. Speaking of drips, last night as I was reading my final series that I needed to read for today, the sink became clogged. I'm using the passive voice there because I don't want to assign blame, but that was really, really time consuming because I tried to unclog it, and in the process of unclogging it, then things started leaking below the sink, which is not a thing you generally want to happen in your kitchen. So then I had to call the after hours plumber, and it just turned into a whole caper. So that's what's been happening in the background here in the house today, is that I think some plumbing is happening beneath my notice, beneath my feet right now. And hopefully I'm going to come back to a kitchen sink. Okay. Let's do some questions while we're paused anyway. Richard Fearing, Krisis, that's my name. With Chip Zdarsky going to Captain America and Joe Kelly going back to Spider-Man, how do we feel about potential of those runs? I think Chip Zdarsky is going to be an outstanding Captain America author because I loved his Batman and he's got levels. I think the problem is people pigeonhole Chip and they tend to want a specific thing from him, and then when they don't get that thing, they get very like, wah, wah, wah. It's not going to be the same as Batman. It's not going to be the same as his Daredevil. I think it's going to be extraordinarily good. Joe Kelly and Spider-Man, if we must. I think what Marvel is finding is putting new people in Spider-Man is getting them a critical drubbing because people are trying to think too far out of the box or go too deep into the continuity box, and it's not entertaining. And I think after getting hit so hard by critical response and fans since 2018 with Nick Spencer and Zeb Wells, I feel like Marvel must feel like they're in a no-win situation. They're like, well, let's bring back somebody who was good. They got to develop a little bit more of a farm team of people who might be good in Spider-Man. And the thing is that, Wells had written Spider-Man before, and Wells isn't really the farm team. He's a big name writer. And I just think after seeing how thankless that task was for Wells, who I do not think was as bad as everybody made him out to be. I think everybody got upset because of the way that it started and because of Paul, and they blew it out of proportion. But I don't think anybody even wants that job now. So yeah, they got Joe Kelly back. Okay. Cruel Angel saying, I like Laura Wolvie, but we just got done hanging out with Elektra, and then that last panel, another team up. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Max Appleman, Miles Morales 30. This was so rad. I had so much fun reading this. Love Ziegler's voice for all the characters, and art worked really well. Yeah, I feel like I didn't get to give as much positivity about it as I wanted to because the lag was killing me, but I unadulterated love it. I think it's so good. It's so entertaining. The question is, one of the things that got announced at Comics Pro this weekend is that Dennis Camp and Cody Ziegler are going to co-write Miles making a visit to the new Ultimate Universe, but I didn't check to see, does that mean his title is getting canceled or going on hiatus, or is it going to go on at the same time as his title? I feel like it would probably be a good idea to just pause his title while that happens, since Cody Ziegler is going to co-write it, but that was pretty big news. Richard Fearing wants to know, with DC and Marvel doing a little crossover coming soon, what are my thoughts on that? I could not possibly care less. Which I don't mean in a fierce, bad question way. I just don't care. Cross-company crossovers have no continuity and don't affect anything. So there is value in a good superhero story, and I guess maybe it'll be a good superhero story. I think it's good for the industry. I think it's good for fans. I think it's kind of rude that they're doing it now after already putting out the omnibus that it could have gone into last year. But I just fundamentally don't care about cross-company crossover stuff usually, especially Marvel and DC, because it has no meaning. It literally just exists to make you excited and sell books. But I like things that have continuity. And so since it's outside of continuity, it's really hard for it to hit for me. One Wheelchair X got to miss out on me talking about the X books. We got to wake up early tomorrow for surgery. Oh no. Well, I hope that goes very, very well for you. Got to go. We'll catch up later and hope you have a great rest of the stream. Yeah, X books being at the end, I guess it just keeps everybody tuned in when they can, because they all know I'm going to freak out at the end. Yeah, Cody Ziegler has a great voice. He's got the best voice Miles has ever had in the comics. I think it's undeniable that he is. And he knows how to write stories that matter for Miles, that don't just feel like dim echoes of Spider-Man stories. And I think that was some of the problem with the Saladin Ahmed arc that started in 2018, is that Ahmed was writing stories that just felt like they were dim echoes of Spider-Man stories, but actually what you should be doing are Miles stories. Logan Wayne says, I've never heard anyone say a bad word about Cody Ziegler's Miles. Yeah, because it's great. It was a little slow to start. I think Ziegler has proved to me on both Miles and Deadpool that he needs an arc to just learn the controls of the machine, because I didn't like the first arc of either of those titles, and now they're two of my favorite titles. Again, I don't know. I think because I was distracted by my computer crashing, I was not effusive enough. I truly loved this Miles issue, and I think Deadpool is so easy to pick up from issue 10, and then issue 11 was the first issue of this crossover, and then this, that you don't have to have been reading Miles, although this really is great references to everything that's been happening with him, and you don't have to have been reading Deadpool. It's just a really good story, and I want you to understand how much I loved it, even though I was distracted while that was happening. Saying Daredevil for Deadpool is our new drinking game. There's so many reasons to drink in my life. Next, that was not somebody else. Gabby is not yet in the X-23 series, Nick M, but I think she's coming. I don't have a Winter Soldier guide. It's been on my list for so long. I really want to get it out before the Thunderbolts movie comes out. And I actually have done a lot of work on it, but it just doesn't quite exist yet. I think, you know why? Because I tried to do every one of his Bucky appearances, both in the Golden Age and in flashback as Bucky. And I think that like killed me. And I need to just separate the Bucky guide to be its own guide. Chris Brogan, Gabby better show up. Why have a Lara book and no Gabby? Makes no sense. Well, I think because to have Gabby right away immediately makes it a big sister book. And I think that Lara has the heightened platform from having been in Deadpool last year. So you don't want to just start with her as big sister. I think you have to establish who she is as Wolverine and the relationship she has to other characters. I think it's no mistake that they had Elektra as the second character because Elektra was also in Deadpool and Wolverine. Would have made more sense if it came out closer to Deadpool and Wolverine, but whatever. So I think that had to happen. I think now that we know who she is and we had 3 quick hit issues, now we can get Gabby in, which is part of why I think Erica Schultz is so smart. Max Appleman also props to Ziegler for not throwing out continuity characters with Deadpool, Ellie, and Princess and Miles, clone that I'm blanking on. What's his? I almost just said his name. Glorp, Smudge, Wolp. I don't know. I forgot his name because you said it and then I forgot. But yeah, Shift. But yeah, Ziegler is making a really good use of the whole cast in both books, which is hard to do in a crossover. And even like, and having Deadpool bumping up against Miles' cast is really, really fun. And then Rodrigo Mariano, a Massive Verse guide is a good idea. Unfortunately, I don't care about the Massive Verse. I tried that writer, whatever his name is, he bores me. Every book I've ever read by him bores me. So it's one of those things where I know I should have a guide for it, but if I don't like it, how am I going to do a guide for it? The last time I did that was Black Hammer because it was picked by Crushing Crisis supporters on Patreon. And so I had to like read a lot of Black Hammer. I do not like Black Hammer and it was not pleasant, but they voted for it. So I did it and I'm proud of it. It's a good guide. So when I'm choosing guides that people don't vote for, the chances of me picking a guide of a property that I really don't like, especially if it's outside of Marvel and DC, are really low. And so since I do know Massiverse should have a guide and it's on my list, but like I would rather do my Lady Death guide, which is stupid bullshit and nobody will ever use it for anything, but I will have fun doing it rather than do the Massiverse guide. But who knows? Maybe I'll grow to like the Massiverse by doing the guide, which happens frequently. I can name a lot of characters where I had no relationship with that character before doing a guide, and then I did the guide, and then I fell in love with that character, which was the case for Moon Knight. Also, here's another page from the Miles book, just to show you how much I loved it. Okay, let's continue. I feel like I was losing steam for a second there because the computer woes were getting to me. Okay, Shadow Cabinet. This is the Milestone universe, and it's continuing, but they do it one miniseries at a time. This was such a good, positive example of how to do like a big finish of a book that's a big fight and has a lot of characters in it, but that still like makes sense and feels like there's beats that matter and the characters matter for running into the big fight. So many people are bad at that. Joseph Illich was fantastic at it. They're fighting this character, this bad guy human character who has powers now. He looks like Captain Atom. It's not Captain Atom. And all of the big Milestone heroes came back and had their moment with him. And I don't know all of the Milestone heroes, so maybe it wasn't as like resonant for me as it could have been, but yet I still followed it. I was still excited for them all. I still liked their contributions to the fight. And the fact that it worked that well for me, even though I don't have a fluency with these characters, just shows how great the series is. I really like the series. It was a little woo-woo crazy at points, and there was clearly more continuity to it than I have any idea about because I haven't read Milestone yet because I'm waiting for all the compendiums to come out. But I still really enjoyed it, and the art was phenomenal. Darryl Banks, Antogun Ilhan, and Ray Anthony Height on art with Chris Sotomayor on colors and Antworld design on letters. I don't know if this is where I would dive in if you want to read the Milestone universe. I am working on a Milestone guide. It's actually like over 50% of the way done. I think you got to start from where it started making its Milestone Returns comeback a couple years ago. But even as somebody who didn't do that, I was still able to follow this and really, really enjoyed it. So I was really impressed. And I'm like, I'm absolutely going to read whatever comes next now because I'm like in, even if I didn't understand everything. And that is the mark of a good superhero comic. Oh, I did more pages from this because the art was just so good. I love her face down there and the shading under the glasses, so you can still see the depth of her eye, but then the shine on the glasses, but not just with like reflective coloring, which I don't like. Chris Sotomayor did it really subtly, and then that little bit of shine in her lip because her lips are still like popping, which is, you know, still is part of her character, even though she's, you know, under duress in this battle. Just such great, vivid colors, really great character designs. Just really, really enjoyed it. I did not read My Little Pony Sky Secret. I apologize. I did, however, God help me, read the final issue of Mystique. Here's a thing that I will say. I don't like Declan Shalvey's art. I never have. I liked him working with Warren Ellis, but that's the only time he ever really worked for me. Love Injection, one of my favorite series. And then I don't think Declan Shalvey is a very good writer. I'm sorry if you ever watch this, Declan. I'm not. You're not a bad person, probably. I mean, who knows? If you are, it's being reflected in your work. This comic was so. Look, I appreciate here's how it all happened as anybody. I love Clue. I love the end of Clue when it explains everything. I love The Usual Suspects. I love that kind of story. But this was basically just hand-waving way that Mystique set all this up so it would happen exactly how she wanted to happen, which was not that pleasing. And also it overlooks the fact that you had to use Fabian Cortez totally out of character and out of canon in a way that he's never existed before in order to make this plot work, which Mystique had no way of predicting. All this issue did was, it was mean-spirited, because it basically said all this happened exactly how it happened because she wanted to happen. And also nobody else can use Mystique anytime soon. That's annoying. It's offensive. And I think if you had a writer who was a talented writer and an artist who was a talented artist on this book, maybe that wouldn't happen. But I'm sorry, if you have an artist who's not even a good artist and isn't good at telling sequential story in their artwork, then why are they going to be a good writer? They're already tanking on Thundercats from Dynamite. Look, if I'm ever going to be, I guess I'm never going to work in comics. Not that that's my goal. I'm not one of these people that because I like saying nasty things about people sometimes. I'm not a nasty person. I don't wish any ill on Declan Shalvey. I wish them ill on this Mystique comic book because it was just fundamentally bad. Just a bad idea. I don't know why an editor would have approved it. I don't know how the art got approved. I don't know why the colorist didn't just throw the pages in a trash can. I don't know why the letterer chose to put the letters on the page. This was uniquely terrible. Okay, the New Gods. Well, you may have noticed at the top of the show that this is not in my top 10 anymore. Because Ram V did this thing that Ram V always does. But here's the thing. It had art from Riccardo Federici, who I love. So I was really, really liking that. In fact, most of the issue. Cagle did very little of the issue because this mostly was Federici kind of building with Ram V on a particular bit of New Gods Fourth World lore, which was fun to look at. But as somebody who's not a big Fourth World geek, it didn't really make a lot of sense. And I get the argument of like, oh, well, you should know. Go back and read Kirby. Guess what, y'all? I'm not doing that right now. So your comic has to be interesting all on its own. And maybe it was intriguing, but I wouldn't call it interesting because Ram V does this. It's the thing that he does. It's why I don't, even though I like him and I respect him immensely, I don't tend to vibe with his comics because he always does one of these big lore dumps early on. And it makes me excited. He doesn't ever pay off the lore. It's just part of how he structures his run. He did it on Batman 2. He did it on Justice League Dark when he was writing that in the backups. It's just the way he writes comics. And I don't like it. So this basically threw out all of the Miracle Man and Big Barda stuff. They were only in this issue for like 2 pages. And it was all this big like world building stuff. And I think the world was built plenty on its own. And I liked the way it was doing only 4 pages of world building in every issue, the past 2 issues. So it just didn't hit for me at all. Like it wasn't bad. It was fine, but it didn't excite me. And because I've seen Ram V take this route so many times before, and I very distinctly have not enjoyed it, it just made me kind of frustrated. So away from the top 10 it goes. Then we come to Nightwing from Dan Waters. Dan Waters, of course, crushing it right now for me on Batman Dark Pattern. Sorry, I have hair stuck to me somewhere. There we go. But he's not crushing it on Nightwing. Actually, this issue of Nightwing 123 was my favorite of the series by him so far. And I tried to articulate why. I think it's because this worked as its own story, so I didn't have to care as much about the greater plot, which I don't really enjoy. There's weapons, a weapons manufacturer in Bloodhaven, and they're bringing in weapons, and the mayor, who's Nightwing's sister, is letting them in, but Nightwing doesn't trust them, but he knows who the person is from his past. No. But this was very small and specific. He's checking in on one particular gang, the Flyboys. The Flyboys are undergoing some body horror that they maybe did not intend to undergo, which is putting them at risk. He's got compassion for them. It ties into an old Batman story that actually exists instead of making up a new character connection on the fly. And that, even though I haven't read that story, made me interested because I was like, oh, this is resolving like a long hanging plot thread that has existed in Bloodhaven. So it was fine. And Dexter Soy, I think, is doing really good art in the series. And I really like how Veronica Candini is coloring his art. So this got me a little bit on board. I still think this story is so boring and small ball and something we've seen before for Nightwing. But this particular issue, I think if you want to sample this run, is a good issue to just pick up. You don't have to have read the 4 issues before. It explains everything you need to know, and it will tell you exactly what's going on with Nightwing. I dropped Null Hunter after issue number 1. It's Michael Walsh's version of Hercules and stories of Olympus, but set in space and also kind of cyberpunk dystopian, just big stack of concepts. If you think you might like that, check it out. Now we come to NYX. And I had a very complex relationship with this issue by Lansing and Kelly with the artist Francesco Martorino, who is the regular artist in the series, colors by Raul Angulo, and letters by Joe Spino. I loved this, but it's because it was a deep dive on my favorite X-Men character from the 2000s, Hellion. It was so rooted in who Hellion was, why he acts like he acts, the relationship he has with X-23, which is one of the reasons I like X-23, and with Sophie Cuckoo. It really was another one of these love letters to Academy X, but I don't think you can have a successful comic in 2025 that's all based around love letters to Academy X, and we know that now because this has been canceled with issue number 10. Also, I don't understand how you have a issue this focused on X-23 and her arc and her past when she also has a solo comic. Like, this is Wolverine, Laura Wolverine, is not Wolverine or Batman or Superman in the case that she's a popular enough character to support multiple books a month. I think it is folly to try to make her the lead character in your team book when she has her own book too, and this book can't even decide what it's about. Like, great, I'm happy that we're breaking Hellion out of his prison caravan, but why does this book exist? What is it as NYX? Because right now it just feels like footnotes on Academy X, which I love, and I'm one of the chief cheerers for, but I think that the reason this book is getting canceled is because it's not about anything. It was about something for the first 3 issues, and then it kind of just meandered in this footnotes on Academy X for 3 issues, and now we're here and it's too late and it's over with already. And I think the fact that Francesco Martorino, who's a fantastic artist, kind of disappeared for a couple of issues and then came back, and meant that nothing that was consistent and tangible about this book to start with kept being the consistent and tangible thing. And I say that having given this issue a 4.5 out of 5, and I don't think you have to have read a single cent issue penny of this series up to this point. If you love Academy X and you know who Hellion is, this issue will work for you. But I'm just so frustrated by the failure of this book. It had so many elements that could have really worked, and I'm afraid it's going to be used as proof that, like, well, the Academy X kids don't sell. Well, no, not when you just do footnotes on Academy X. Make it a real comic book with a real point and a consistent tone and a consistent story and consistent art. Maybe then it will sell. But if you just make it one of 2 Laura Kinney books and it doesn't really have any of those things, then it's not going to sell. And I'm kind of happy it was canceled. Finally, I get to talk to you about power fantasy. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to give myself a minute to talk about up to this point and then another minute. It was my number 1 or 2 comic of 2024. ASMR. I love this comic book so much. The whole concept, as Gillen tells it, is what if you had a book with 6 Dr. Manhattans? Or what if you had the whole X-Men Quiet Council, but they weren't going to do any fighting. They're just going to hate each other. It's so good. It's basically mutants in the world, mutants just like X-Men, and also angels and demons, all of the things that Marvel has. But what happens if they don't do superhero fights and they really could have the power to totally disintegrate the Earth like Magneto has, or the power to turn off every brain on Earth like Xavier has? What would their history look like if they emerged with the atomic age starting in 1945 and we followed them all the way up until 1999? What would be different about the history of the world? And some things would be very, very different. And that's what the first arc of issues 1 through 5 told. I did this fun thing yesterday that took me an hour to do and then an hour to read, and that's part of why I'm behind, and I'm happy for every second I spent on it. I screen captured the pages of all of the initial trade paperback that came out a couple weeks ago of every scene that was a flashback scene prior to the 1999 continuity, and I put them all in one PDF so I could read it sequentially instead of the flashbacks happening at different points, and it read so well. So I read the whole sequential power of fantasy, and then I read all the present day action in 1999 and all the issues up to this point, and then I read this issue. Here's the thing. Absolutely don't pick it up here. First of all, because issue number 1 was a perfect issue number 1. And 2, because this is a building things issue. It's building in new information. It's building in new history. It's building in new character connections. And if you have not been reading the book to this point, it is not going to make any sense to you. I loved all the stuff that it's built, because what's so interesting about how Gillen is telling this story along with his collaborators, Casper Wingard, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Casper Wingard on art, and Clayton Cowles on letters, and Ryan Hughes as a designer, and an editor, very important, Katie West. The thing that Gillen is doing is it's a trick, it's sleight of hand. He's showing these relationships in the present day and saying, believe something. And then just when we think we start to believe something about their dynamics, about what they're doing, about what they're choosing, then he reveals something in the past and it changes our opinion. And he's done that a few times already, which is why all that flashback material is so interesting. In this issue, he makes tangible and literal a thing that we all probably could have assumed by now, which is that a certain character who took a very egregious action in issue number 1 that almost ended things for the entire planet did it for a very specific reason. It's because he knew it wasn't going to be really the end for him. And we find out why this issue. Really, we found out why a couple of issues ago, but he makes it textual here and we flash back to see how that got set up. I don't think anybody's doing better superhero in all of comics right now. This is heroes as gods. This is heroes as nuclear deterrents to each other. The art is absolutely phenomenal. And Casper Wingard doing his own colors on this, it's just so interesting. I could see for some people it might hit because it's a little dry and it's a little thoughtful, but that's what Gillen gives you. That's what he gave you on Immortal X-Men. That's what he gave you on Wictiv. There's always this kind of academic, thoughtful aspect. Also, his endnote material and the letters column in this, so cool. I wish I had captured a page of the letters column. I don't think I did. It was a letters column unlike anything I've ever seen before. He just excerpted the thing he wanted to respond to or explain from each letter. And instead of doing it in columns, he ran them wide and he put like the name of the letter writer next to them. So it was I've just never seen a letter column done like that. I can't praise this highly enough. I could talk about it every week. Think about what if X-Men really was about just the relationship between Xavier and Magneto, and it always had been, and they're always in this nuclear, how do you say that word? Detente, where they're facing off and neither of them can do it. It's a game of chicken because if one of them does it, the other one will do it. And this book is about 6 of the Omega mutants or creatures, as the case might be, on Earth and why they can't do it. I love it so much. It just makes me so excited, so happy. Power Rangers Prime, I'm not reading, although in a previous stream, one of you said it's really the easiest Power Rangers to pick up, which is cool. Prairie Gods, Amarok, I'm not reading because I honestly, I just couldn't tell what it was about. But there's a giant wolf in an airplane. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. I didn't read it. So we come to the question all along the Watchtower. This was a big delivery issue. It delivered on things that had been set up for the first 3 issues. There was no big mystery here. It was just kind of setting up for the finale, which is fine. If you have 5 issues, that's what you got to do. Personally, I'd rather have a smaller story in the first couple of issues and then some more issues instead of build up, set up, and then climax. But that's what you get from some series. This is by Alex Segura. It's got art from Cian Tormey and Raul Fernandez, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., and letters by Willie Schubert. And it was good, but it was just paying off everything that happened. There's no real... They're captured. Basically, the question is captured and she breaks out and they're about to confront Eradicator. That's what this issue was. It was still very enjoyable. The art was great. I really liked how they used Animal Man in it, but there's just not a lot more to it than that because that's where we're on the series. I don't even need the next 20 seconds. If you like well, this is what I'll use it for. It's not a question book in the way that people are used to. And I think people who really show up for Renee Montoya, are not enough of a crowd to keep her ongoing going. So you can't just use her in the normal way because there's not enough people pleased by that. But B, like, it's interesting to break her out of that world because she's usually part of Batman's world, and it's fun to see her in this broader world. And the same reason it's fun to see Batwoman in this broader world, as long as you don't make them a permanent part of this broader world, because then you lose the special quality of breaking them out of the smaller world. So I don't want to see the question be on the Watchtower forever and ever, but for one story, for one miniseries, it really, really works. Rat City I have not caught up on yet. I just read the first issue. It's basically Spawn 2099 in a totally separate continuity from regular Spawn. And it's by Erica Schultz, who I've been praising about how smart her writing is. So you might dig it if you like that sort of thing. The Regulators by Advent Comics. I did not see digitally. Maybe it was on Global Comics. I clearly didn't spend enough time on Global Comics this week. Rick and Morty Ricklemania. So I actually do like Rick and Morty, which might surprise you because I don't always like dumb comedy, but so much of Rick and Morty is like the motion and the voices of watching it and the way that it's animated and the way that it's voiced. And I have read some Rick and Morty comic books before, and I just don't know even if the writers are so funny, I don't know if it can achieve the same thing in a comics medium. So I might check out an upcoming one. I'm not like a Rick and Morty stan, but I do watch every new episode of Rick and Morty as it comes out, which may surprise you. And the comics just, they're fine. At one point I'm like, oh, the comics will be like getting new Rick and Morty. That'll be great. I'll read that. And then the comics were mildly fine. And then more Keen Spot. This one I'm kind of intrigued by, Robot Girl. But again, I'm not reading Keen Spot until any of you reads it first because I think they're punking me and it's not real. Then RuneScape. I will say this is an online RPG, massive multiplayer RPG, RuneScape. I have no idea about it. I've never played it. I'm tempted to read it though, because that cover, I mean, we know I like pink on a cover, and that's a giant pink skull. I'm in, but I didn't read it now. Then Silence from Afterlight Comics. I'd never even heard of that comic company before. And I thought, I mean, it's a man in a Santa hat getting in a cab, showing an extremely diagonal angle. Does that sell you a comic? Did that sell you this comic? Clearly they're playing on the trope of like Silent Night, but like seeing this guy getting into a cab wearing a Santa hat saying silence, is that selling you on buying this comic? Me, it didn't. Okay. Spectrum, I hated issue number 1, so I didn't keep reading. It's a fine comic. Many of you like it. I can't do fake history of fake music. And like, if you want to make me feel something, do a real history of real music. Same for fake history of fake civil rights. No, we live in a world with real civil rights. If you're going to tell a story about the modern day in the world, tell me a real story about real civil rights. Then we come to Star Trek, When the Walls Fell. Almost got me to read it because When the Walls Fell, but I don't read Star Trek comics. Maybe that'll change this year. Then we get to Star Wars Ahsoka, which I haven't read because I am going to watch this show now that it's over and done with. I will eventually watch it, so I didn't just want to read the adaptation, although Rodney Barnes is fantastic. So the idea of reading the adaptation by Rodney Barnes is exciting, but I will just make the time to watch the show eventually. So now we come to High Republic, Fear of the Jedi. And this is being billed as the finale of Star Wars High Republic. There's 2 finales, actually. The finale in the Marvel Star Wars books, and then the finale in the Dark Horse All Ages Star Wars books, which are in the same universe, but they're 2 separate groups of characters we're following, and they're both hitting their finales right now. Which I think is weird. How do you do a finale of an entire High Republic era? But I think the point is, it's the finale of this particular group of characters. And since The Acolyte didn't get continued to a season 2, I think kind of Lucasfilm is wrapping up this High Republic era and putting it back on the shelf for a little while. But I will say that I really like this. And this is why well, here's that timeline. Okay, so here's where we are. The High Republic is all the way up here. Young Jedi Adventures and The Acolyte. It's before everything else. The reason it worked for me is some of these books by Kevin Scott have felt too small ball. The whole point of the High Republic, it's the decadent phase. It's when there's Jedi everywhere. So to just focus on these conflicts in certain planets or against one particular Hutt crime lord, it just never really rang true for me. It's like you have this whole playpen and you're so laser focused on this. This issue makes a point, even in the opening scroll, to say there are 4 distinct conflicts and the universe could fall apart if the Jedi fail in any of these 4. If they fail on just one of these battlefronts, the opening scroll said, the wave of darkness will extinguish the light of the Jedi forever. That's the book I wanted to read all along. So it needed all of the ongoing High Republic series and all the mini-series along the way to get us to this point. Now they're at this point. I'm enjoying myself. So pretty solid art from Marika Cresta and colors from Jim Campbell, letters from Ariana Mayer. I don't know if it's going to make a lick of sense to you if you haven't been reading High Republic all along, but it's nice to know that High Republic was actually building towards something and that we've finally arrived at that something. Okay. The fever dream that is Storm the comic book continues, courtesy of Maria Aldel, Lucas Wernick, Alex Guimarães, and Travis Lanham. This was like Hickman's Gods condensed all into one issue in a way that totally made sense. We know that we're going to make Storm kind of a cosmic force. And so this pauses to tell us the story of why is she going to be a cosmic force. And maybe that's going to frustrate some readers who are like, well, it's not about Storm. But I think at the point that you've tipped that that's the direction your book is going to go in, and you've given us 4 great issues spent with Storm at a very personal level, I'm okay with spending one issue that's really a one-shot to explain the higher level thing that's going on, especially when Wernick and colors from Guimarães. I mean, this was stunning. And it still gave us a couple of sections, a couple of pages of Storm arguing with Doom that was really, really satisfying. But, you know, and it gave us a little glimpse around the Marvel Universe, which was so beautiful. But really playing out this beat of Eternity and like, what does Eternity want? And like, why is Storm, who Eternity has chosen? It's just so interesting. And it was easy for me to follow, even though it was a big up here plot, because Eternity and the other universal concepts were personified, and they were personified in such an easy to follow way that had such human kind of base instinct to the conflict. So I followed it. I think this is a remarkable book. I don't think anything else at Marvel right now is playing in that low space of heroes and their lives and their loves, and also that high space of cosmic, whereas DC is doing that exceedingly well. That's what the whole Absolute line is. It's what New Gods is doing. I think there's a lot of books at DC that are playing on both the kind of big level and the small level at the same time. I don't think Marvel's very good at that right now, nor it's much more of a DC kind of a book, right? But for that reason, this to me swings with the best of the DC books right now, because it just has a feeling like the DC books that it is able to make me care about a character happening down at the bottom, and also make me care about the things that are happening in a cosmic sense. James Abel, Storm's new white outfit. Wow, beautiful. Storm versus Doctor Doom. Love it. Did this series just become a major Marvel cosmic event? I think yes. Max Appleman saying, yes, this is how you do comics. And you know what's funny? I found somebody on Twitter who's like, oh, Storm's been so boring. What? They're like, we're not spending enough time with Storm. Yet in this issue, all the issues up until now, we spent the most time with Storm we spent in Storm in a decade. I didn't understand it, but no, to each their own. Okay. Yeah, I took three. Okay. I just have to speak on this for a second. No, I didn't read it, and I'm not going to read it. I love Stranger Things, and I read the first few Stranger Things comics. I'm like, ooh, how cool to expand this world to stories that we will never have time to tell. Not only because we don't have time to tell them to make that many Netflix shows, but because these kids are always getting older, right? Honestly, the scope of these stories, the quality of these stories is like, they forgot to buy toilet paper. Like there's nothing to tell. The Duffer Brothers aren't giving Jodie Hauser anything to work with, and so nothing happens. So this one, it's Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons, The Rise of Hellfire. The whole part of the book is that it's going to explain how the kids started playing Dungeons and Dragons with this character that the Human Torch guy played in the last season. You don't need a mini series for that. They said, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons with me? And so they played Dungeons and Dragons. Now this does have a little bit of a hook that it's going to like tell the story of their Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And I do think that is kind of interesting. But this idea that it's like the origin of how they started playing Dungeons and Dragons with this guy, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, there's so much lore and so much of an interesting universe in Stranger Things. And the fact that they license these comic books and then they like have things on the level of like, where did that box of tissues on the end table come from? Let's do a deep dive. It's just so offensive to me. Like, who agreed to print these comics? And I guess that Stranger Things is a big brand. You see it in the Hot Topic or something, and you get it for your kid because your kid likes Stranger Things, which is a very cynical way to make comics. But I just wish they were telling stories that meant something. Okay, Synap. I think I must have talked about this once already because I had notes on it, but I had no recollection whatsoever until I read my notes. This issue was really effective. Given that I had no recollection of the prior issues, I almost think this worked as a first issue. It's a big giant robot world, and it's got people who can drive the giant robots, but there's only one giant robot, and there's only one person who can drive the giant robot at any given time, and they got to take a lot of drugs to do it. And this really explained the relationships between past drivers and how their personhood has really been eroded by having this responsibility thrust on them, and also the drugs. And now there's a new little girl who might be a future driver, and they're both kind of descending on her, both to retrieve her, but also to maybe advise her and give her a little bit of support. And then there's the current driver in training who is also having a tough time of it. It really took me down to the personal level in a way that the first two issues didn't totally take me. And I understand why. The first two issues by Chris Moses with art from Andrea Gianni and colors by J.M. Alfredi with letters from Reed Hinckley Barnes were very much establishing what are the stakes of this world, what is the giant robot from, why do we have it, what's the mystery. And I think it was right to do that. But I think now that we spent an issue getting really personal, now I'm really into this comic because I feel like I understand what the human stakes are as well as the giant robot stakes. This is very, very similar to, I thought it was going to be within arm's reach, but it is. This is very, very similar to one of my favorite comic books, Met Cadets, by Greg Pak. The first Met Cadet U is such a brilliant comic book. I love it so much. This has fantastic artwork from Takeshi Miyazawa, which I love. This is the second series. Actually, I haven't read this yet. That's why I have it physically. But the first series I absolutely love. And then the show on Netflix was great. Totally kid appropriate. A little bit of like robot violence and peril, but really I would say appropriate for any kid like 7 and up, and just really, really heartfelt, beautiful, beautiful series. So this is recapturing that Met Cadet vibe, but again, with more drugs. So maybe not as appropriate for children. Thunderbolts Doomstrike. I have the feeling, I didn't really spend a lot of time online this weekend, but I have the feeling that this is a series that is really going to divide opinions, and I am on the I friggin' love it side of the divide. This is by Lansing and Kelly with art from Tommaso Bianchi, colors from Yen Nitro, what a name that is, and letters from Joe Sabino. He loved it. So great. First of all, it starts with this beat of Bucky, Winter Soldier, I refuse to call him Revolution, and Doctor Doom, which they just had a run in Thunderbolts last year. So again, books that already set up the conflicts that would be for One World Under Doom. Love that. And it really plays that out in a way that I believed, and that was interesting, and that they should really have kind of this standoff with each other. And Doom actually respects Winter Soldier enough that he offers him a position in his world of Doom based on what happened in that Thunderbolt series, which was referenced in the first issue of One World of Doom. So great editing there, right? And of course, Bucky turns Doom down because like, no way. And so then Bucky tries to do a mission to try to infiltrate Doom with Songbird. And so that connects us to the original Thunderbolts. And it could not possibly go worse. It goes as bad as how the original Civil War happened at Marvel, and Doom gets to make it look like it was all Bucky's fault. The art in this was incredible. Yen Nitro's colors, so great, playing with that really hyper pop of red and green complementary colors on Doom, but then really like playing it a little bit more desaturated and grounded with Bucky, even when they're on the same panel with each other. So smart. I loved the stakes that this sets up. I love that Bucky made the wrong choice. And even though it was Doom who did the evil thing, Bucky unequivocally made the wrong choice that precipitated that evil thing happening, which I think is such an interesting choice / vibe. I'm really, really into this, and I love the idea of where it's going. I just loved it. And you know what? It had enough of a tie to classic Thunderbolts that it doesn't feel like it's Thunderbolts in name only just to take advantage of the movie coming out. It did to me feel like Thunderbolts. All right, I'm going to take one final break now to make sure I haven't totally ignored your comics. Drink, and then we are going to make it to the end. Okay. Let's see where we left off. NASA wants more Mystique. I want different Mystique. I want Mystique by somebody other than Declan Shalvey. But if you liked it, I love that you liked it. James Abel says, Mystique number 5. What just happened? Is Mystique alive or dead? I don't know if I care enough to go back and read it again. Please don't. How is One World Under Doom? It's my number 1 comic of 2025, Richard Fearing. So it must be at least halfway decent. Nightwing has a sister. You got to catch up on your Tom Taylor Nightwing. Spoilers, Nick, and spoilers. James Abel, NYX number 8. Beautiful colors in this issue. I agree. This is also a Julian issue and dealt with his decision on who he wanted to be in an interesting way. Agree. And as somebody who loves that character, of course, I had a really good time. Yay for Hellion. I agree. No, NYX is canceled. Yeah, I think we found out over the weekend that the solicits came out, and it looks like NYX, X-Force, and X-Factor are all only going to make it to issue number 10, but Phoenix is continuing on, and we'll have to wait another month or two to get to the solicits for some of the other books like Extraordinary to see if they're going to make it. Ooh, Nick, and I had no idea. Love the X-Force team. Richard Fearing, I had heard people say they love Mark Russell's X-Factor. Well, some people might feel that way. I don't know if I've ever seen an X book get a beatdown on social media as hard as the beatdown on the X Factor, which is funny because people really like Mark Russell, but X-Men fans were not having it. James Media Master, what series like Power Fantasy can you recommend? Power Fantasy. Really like how you said X-Men, but different and deep. Power Fantasy. I mean, to a degree, Wickdev, Gillen's Wicked and Divine, is also like that. It's about people with superpowers who have to be in a relationship with each other and with regular human beings, but it's much more about pop music, and so it's got much more of a gods as regular people vibe to it. But let's see. Let me just look around. Is there any other book that's like X-Men? I mean, you know, you might like Black Hammer, right? Which is like, what if the superheroes of the extreme age of comics kind of got tucked away in a little pocket universe and didn't know what to do with themselves there, and so just went to being normal humans. I think any indie book that has a certain amount of like people with powers that could be feared or hated or maybe need to be hidden, kind of has that vibe. But I can't think of a book that does it as well as Power Fantasy recently, and I think that's just because Gillen is very, very good at those vibes, which is why he's my favorite all-time X-Men writer. James Abel, the question all along the Watchtower number 4, some good Renee in Bat one part, Cyborg Superman just seems out of place for me. Yeah, it does seem like a weird bad guy for the question, like how is she going to take him out? But I guess we're going to find out next issue. Detente. Detente. It's one of those words that even though I speak French, I've seen it written so many times and saw it written so many times in the time that I did not speak French that I just have my like English wrong version of how I pronounce it in my head, which is always the sign of a kid who's done a lot of reading and not as much speaking to other people. The question has been my most unexpected favorite series of the All In line. Yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. And I think a huge part of that, Cian Tormey's art is just incredible. Spectrum number 3, few pages of too much going on, but I did enjoy the last few pages showcasing how music can impact people in unique ways. Yeah, I like the theme. I just wish it was about real life music. Storm number 5, Storm. Oh, we already did that one. Everybody liking Storm. Lance McNair returned. Needs to catch up on Storm, but I'll be driving, so may not be commenting much. So Max pointed out that this panel of Jean... Oh, you're not going to be able to see it if I leave his comment up, so I'll take the comment off when I get there. Looks just like Oddfell. Oh, you can see it. It looks just like Oddfell, who we do Near Mint Condition with, and she does cosplay as Jean. So it's like, oh, did Lucas Vornick use Oddfell as reference? That would be so cool. Pitty Ma, bye. Have a great week. I don't even remember if I got to say hello to you, Pitty Ma. David Cox asking what site I use to read these comics. So a lot of the indie comics you can read on Global Comics. Even if it doesn't have the #1 newest issue, it has so many of the trades. That's how I've been catching up on all of the Todd McFarlane Spawn books. That is all of the trades. So like, why go and spend money on them if you could get them all you can eat on Global Comics? When I was doing this just to react to last month's issue, which is how I was reading it on doing it on Crushing Krisis, I would just use DC Unlimited because that goes all the way up to the last month. And then I would have to buy some Marvel books and I would buy them on Comixology. Now that I'm doing this, I'm getting as many as I can on Global Comics. But then some weeks when I'm in a crazy rush like this, it's just Comixology, which costs a lot of money. But if you're buying a lot of books on Comixology, if you have a Prime membership, you get a discount. And if you have a Comixology membership, you get a discount. It's still a lot of comics. I don't know that I'm going to do this all this year. It's very time intensive and it's very dollar intensive. Right now, it's having a return for me because of the amount of traffic that I'm getting on Crushing Krisis and traffic on YouTube and bring the channel back. But I will say, I don't know if I'm going to pull 40 or 50 books every week, all year in real time, because knowing that the books show up on DC United or whatever it is, DC Unlimited, only 30 days later, I could save the whole DC budget if I just let myself get 1 month behind in DC, which is how I read all of last year. I would just let myself get 1 month behind in DC and 3 months behind on Marvel, and then just read them for the cost of my subscription. So I think that's fine for all of you. And I think that that is one way I would recommend engaging with the show. Get your DC subscription, your Marvel subscription, your Global Comics subscription, all together. All 3 of them is less than you're paying for Netflix every month, and read unlimited comics, and then use the show to like make a pull list of the things that sound interesting to you. And then when they hit those services, read them. That would be my official recommendation. Lance McNair, do I think the kids aging too much in Stranger Things has affected the show negatively in any way? No, I think the Duffer Brothers absolutely should direct an X-Men movie. And I think that they really leaned into how old the kids would be in every season to make it work with their story. And this is the first season where the kids are going to get unnaturally old for where they would be in this story. You have to think kids usually get cast 3, 4, 5 years older than they actually are in TV. So often we've seen 13 and 14-year-olds played by 18 and 19-year-olds, that the fact that they cast them so close to their actual ages back in 2014 when the show started means that they actually, now, sure, how many years have gone by? How old is my child? Now that they're like 11 or 12 years older and they're like 25, now it's starting to really seem like they're too old, but they're going to be 25 doubling for like 17 or 18 in this final season, which works because all sorts of shows do that. Anime, have I made a poster video of my favorite all-time comic books? No, maybe I should. I've not done any recorded stuff because honestly, I go so far down the YouTube hole and I'm really trying to keep fixed in my mind and my vision. My main job is Crushing Krisis. The Crushing Krisis guides have to be up to date. The information has to be good. It has to have all of Marvel's current collections, all of DC's current collections. That's my job. And so if I have time to do this once a week and also do that job, and this helps that job because when I read everything, I know how to update everything, then that's good. I don't know if I'm going to get back to pre-recorded YouTube videos. There's one I actually really want to do, and I might just do it as a live because as soon as you get into video editing, that's like 10 hours down the drain, and 10 hours is a guide. And I can't give up the chance to do new guides to do video because video is ephemeral. Y'all watch it the week it comes out and then maybe it gets some more views over time. But it's, the guide is going to exist forever and always have that information. So I haven't done a poster video of my favorite comics of all time. And maybe I will as we figure out what this YouTube space is going to be as the year goes on. I wonder if Oddfell knows about the image of Phoenix. I've not, Max and I meant to send it to her and I've just been so busy. I'm going to send it to her after the show, and also Hoopla, right? I don't have that here in New Zealand, but a lot of you have Hoopla and like some other library-based ones, Libby or whatever. Basically, go to your library, because being a constituent of your local library helps them say that they should get the funding that they get because they have the service that they have and people are using them. So everybody go to your local library, get a library card, and ask the librarian. Just be like, hey, I like comics. Is there a way for me to read comics digitally? The librarian will tell you all that you need to know. And so, yeah, a lot of people who are just catching up on trades, which I think is another great way to read at zero cost if you get them through your library, are doing it through their library. So I really think, even though I'm spending a lot of time and money in order to do this, I want to give you ways that you could do it for as low as like $20 a month. And I think that Marvel plus DC plus Global Comics combo will get you real close to that, and then a library card. So I think that is definitely the way to go. With the X-Men film being written as some of the rumor castings, could I put a team together for the first X-Men film who would be on the team? That's too big for me to handle right now, Richard Fear. Great question, though. Maybe if we have time at the end. Because we need to get through the end of these books. So I went up let's get done here. Let's see. Oh, I love this so much. Okay. Titans in Love. This is Titans issue number 20. It's written by John Layman with art from Pete Woods and colors from Wes Abbott, letters from art. Pete Woods doing his own colors, Wes Abbott on letters. So this is very much a continuation of what's been going on in the last few Titans issues, but it also works as a one-shot if you just want to come here and do it. First of all, I just have to highlight this page. Tom Taylor, the writer of previous Titans, is Australian. John Layman is not Australian. There's this animal in Australia, the quokka, that is so adorable that it makes everybody happy, and they're very, very timid and sweet. So they're thought to be happy, and so the crowd is getting agitated due to Raven's powers, and they're like, quick, Beast Boy, you gotta quokko yourself now. And then there's this hilarious editor's note: native to Western Australia, the peaceful and impossibly cute marsupial known as the quokka, a relative of kangaroos and wallabies, have a reputation for being the happiest animal on earth because its peaceful disposition and distinctive ever-present smile. Which, what a funny gag, and like drawn really well, works really well in the story. Like that's how to do a good Beast Boy gag. I really like the direction this Titans comic is going. It feels, I enjoy that this whole run is the Titans being capable, being adults, not being losers, not just not knowing what they're doing, but there's always something a little bit bigger looming over them. So for the first part of the run, which was by Tom Taylor, that bigger thing looming over them was Trigon and all the hell stuff, and that really worked. Now we have somebody, I'm going to give you a spoiler, close your ears, la la la, if you don't want to hear it. The thing looming over them right now is Psycho Pirate, but also other stuff too. And I like the idea that, like, yeah, they're really good, they're really capable, they're doing a good job, they're just getting outmaneuvered behind the scenes by Psycho Pirate. And that, to me, as a Titans plot, really, really works, especially because it's still leaning into all of these characters, who they are as people, their connections to each other. It's just making me really love it. Like, it's really making me feel like John Layman loves like Wolfman and Perez Titans and is writing a love letter to it. And this is a Titans book that I could go on reading forever. It's Titans that feels very X-Men-y. It's Titans where they all feel significant, they all have a part to play. It's not just about like two of them always being the focus. And I think I hope that other people are enjoying it as much as I am enjoying it. Now we come to Ultimate Black Panther. Well, I think we might have reached the book that I'm going to scream about this week. Brian Hill, you have one of the best artists in all of comics, Stefano Caselli, drawing your book. Why, for the 5th month running, is it starting with 10 pages of conversation, and you didn't even draw any panels or like tell the artist to draw any panels that were interesting? It's not like walk and talk. We're not experiencing the world of Wakanda. We're not seeing things that like show a dichotomy of opinions between the two characters. It's literally 10 pages in a row of two characters in a room talking to each other. What are you doing? Why are you a writer? Who is paying you to do this? Who is reading this comic and pretending that it's good? They're stupid people who are pretending that it's good with no taste. Then there's a fight. And so what I saw in the comments by everybody online about this comic this week is like, oh, but this one turned around, it had action. No little bit of action forgives how stupid and badly written this comic book is. I hate it. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to drop it because this was how angry I was reading it. I was like, page number 2 of talking, page number 3 of talking. And by the time I got to page number 10 of talking, I think my blood pressure had gotten so high that you could have boiled a kettle on my head. It boggles my mind that he's allowed to do this. I can't believe anybody is letting somebody make a comment. And the thing is, the conversation's not even good. Chris Claremont could do it in a single panel. That's not just about decompression. That's about being a bad writer. Bad writer, Brian Hill. Bad writer. You're a bad writer. Not all the time. I've read good comics from you. But right now, somebody needs to take you off of this book, cancel this book, put every digital and physical copy book in a rocket and fire it into the heart of the sun. Now we come to Ultimate Wolverine. I had some problems with the first issue of Ultimate Wolverine because the lettering was taking me out of the creepiness of the plot. Well, Corey Petit took care of that real quick because I didn't notice anything that really bothered me about the lettering. Chris Condon, I think this guy is really, really going to be the next Jed MacKay, where we love him on everything, because this and Green Arrow by him are so good. Alessandro Cappuccio, who we all loved from Moon Knight, first of all, this cover of Wolverine and the reflection of Colossus, and like the reflection of his claws are defining Colossus's eyes. What a good sketch. Also, I just want to highlight this, a totally random page showing people hiking through the woods, and there's not actually motion in every part of the page, but he still paneled it into 3 panels to draw us along to like caption, setting, woods are quiet, oh, people are walking. He could have just done this as a straight up pinup without that motion, but he didn't, and it worked because it conveyed storytelling. But really, the art in this is just so phenomenal, so different than what he did on Moon Knight. And this is really about like Colossus and Magic and Omega Red are in control of the Eurasian continent, and so they're in control of this Winter Soldier Wolverine, but they have their suspicions. To them, he's not their friend Logan, he's just this weapon, and they're like, how good is your weapon really? So this issue is all about Magic and Colossus and Omega Red really having some questions about how good this weapon is, but it's Logan. He's the best there is at what he does, even when he's the Winter Soldier, and when he does is not very nice. This also had a thrilling pop of the Maker kind of inserting himself into how Wolverine got to this point, even though in current continuity, the Maker is off the table for another like 14 months or whatever. I just loved it. It was so clever. It was so vicious. It had some X-Men that we know and love, but it used them in a different way, and it felt significant to the world of Ultimate Marvel. Like, this is a thing that had to happen in this world, and it's happening, and we're getting to watch it happen. Love that for us. Oh, and yet another page. Oh, because we got, I mean, not to spoil, but spoilers. We got a Fastball special, but not in the way anybody thought we were going to get it. And also, this artwork is so good. Brian Valenza's colors. Wow. Okay. Well, here's the third book I might be dropping for my mental health. I've never in my life, while I've been actively reading comics, dropped an X-Men flagship for being too bad. But I can't talk about this comic anymore. I can't. I can't even get, the thing is, I can't even be funny talking about it anymore. I get that all these comics are trying to introduce a new generation of mutants, and they're trying to kind of find heart and hope in the world of X-Men again, but you've got to write the characters we like well, like, or take them all off the board. Like, I am the key proponent of put all these characters to bed and let's just exist with the new characters. I think if we were doing that, I could get there. But to have a book like this and write every single established character on your cast so badly, and then write all the new characters so badly so you can't even tell what their personalities are, and then have a totally nothing conflict between them again, and we're at issue 10, I wish this was getting canceled at issue 10, because this is dragging down the whole line by being a center book that has nothing to say, nothing interesting, and is not inspiring new and interesting plots which are going elsewhere, which at least Jed MacKay's X-Men is doing. I will say that the art and the colors married up a little bit better here, and I do really like I like Brazan as an artist, and I like Matthew Wilson as a colorist, and I think they really came together and worked here. But just the writing for Nightcrawler was wrong. The writing for Wolverine was wrong. The writing for Jubilee was wrong. This book is all wrong. It shouldn't exist, and as much as I want to keep reading it so you can delight in me getting angry about it, it just makes me so sad that anybody could have, everybody in comics, loved X-Men, it feels like at some point. Most writers in comics would give anything to write X-Men, and to be at that pinnacle of comics, X-Men, which, like, along with Batman and Spider-Man is kind of like the top of every sales chart every week, and to just be doing such a bad job at it where your affection for the characters doesn't show through at all, and it doesn't feel like anything's happening or going anywhere, it just makes me depressed about the state of comics, and it makes me depressed that some editor at Marvel, Tom Brevoort, is like letting this happen and thinks that these scripts and these pitches and this story direction is like the way to go. This whole structure needs to be taken apart, and my fervent hope is that Marvel is steering into a big line-wide relaunch of all of their titles, which they might be, because it seems like a lot of things are getting canceled right now, and it also feels like Hickman's Imperial, which is called The End of the Beginning, and One World Under Doom are both going to end around the same time in July or August, so maybe we're looking looking for a big September, October relaunch, and maybe we'll just wipe the slate of all of these X-Men comic books, because right now, the only one of them that I'd be willing to keep would be Storm. Jed McKay's X-Men, for me, it's getting better, but I don't know how you, literally, I think there's 20 books in the line right now. How the X-Men line has never been this bad. I thought it was bad during Resurrection, and I was there reading at that time, but there were good books in Resurrection. Weapon X was actually a really fun book. Jean Grey was a fun book. X-Men Blue had good months, right? Even if, no matter what X-Men era we look at, you can whine about Chuck Austin, but during the Chuck Austin era, Extreme X-Men was happening, and so was Morrison's X-Men. There is no period of X-Men. Late 90s, you want to pick, there's still cool stuff. There was Mutant X happening. There was Joe Casey writing a subversive run on Uncanny. There's no period of X-Men you can pick where so many of the books feel so unmotivated as this period. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to keep talking about it because it's the next couple of books too. Oh, here we go. I put the credits in my show PDF. Yeah, I just wanted to show this because the colors are working for me now, but I don't think Brazan is the right artist for this title. He should be on something like Thunderbolts, something that's like a little bit more grounded. Uncanny X-Men needs big pop and flash. This is not that. And again, just written so thuddingly bad. World Tree. This was a shark jumper for me. And I'll tell you why, because this was one of those issues where it's like, it's going to be wordless mostly, and we're just going to go deep and show you what this character is experiencing. And to a degree, we've teased this undernet for so long in World Tree that it kind of feels satisfying to see just how messed up the visions of it are, and like how much it would affect your psyche to just fall into this world as you're staring at a screen. And I'm almost convincing myself now that actually I liked it more. And I think if this was a book I was talking to other people about, if I was talking about this book the way I was talking about Severance, I think I would actually like this issue, because I think there is so much texture and it's so much disturbing imagery, and it does say a lot for the character. But to just read this by myself in my room and then close the laptop and be like, okay, I read it, it just didn't take me anywhere. And I think I already had assumed a lot of this was happening in the undernet, so it wasn't shocking to see that this is what happened to that character, even though it did contain some shocks and some surprises in its wordless journey through this disturbing imagery. It just feels like if I was in a book club talking about this book, I would be much more excited to talk about this issue. And if you were all reading it and if we were all discussing it together every time, and if you were as rabid about this the way you are about like Storm or other comics that you're all reading, even The Question, it would be more fun for me. But I just feel like Tynion's doing this thing where he's really pumping the brakes, and he does this on a lot of his indie work when it starts to catch on and he realizes he's not gonna have to wrap it up in 1 or 2 arcs because it's got legs. It feels like a lot of times the 3rd and the 4th arc really get like moving through jello slow, because he knows he's got time and he's deciding how long the book is going to be. I think Kieran Gillen is better at that, where he does go hard in his first arc, but Kieran Gillen always assumes he's only going to get a second arc, and if he has to wrap it up in a second arc, he will, or sometimes he doesn't even get a second arc, right? And so he just structures it so it'll work. But then Kieran Gillen already knows what he would do if it would be 50 pages, and he's written about that many times. Tinian, even though he conquers the world of comics, he rules all over it all. I don't know that Tinian actually has mastered that. Also, there was another Tinian book this week. I missed excerpting it. It'll be in the regrets next week. I remember reading it. It was the Devils, maybe, but I totally missed. I just realized now it's not in my PDF, so we'll talk about it next week. This is The Walking Dead Deluxe, which continues to come out and colorize The Walking Dead. Now we get to 3 X-Men books at the end of the alphabet. This is Weapon X, which really could just be X-Force and should be X-Force because it's got Cable, Deadpool, Wolverine. And why is it not called X-Force? But I like that they're establishing another brand name in terms of Weapon X-Men, which we only had briefly last year, and I think it's a good brand name. And Deadpool actually jokes at one point about the name. Not Xavier, not Claremont, not Leafield, not Morrison, not that Hickman guy. None of them even thought of this name. This name is great. Like, really funny gags throughout from Joe Kelly. But also, it felt like an X-Force book. It's about violent characters trying to take a proactive approach, not only to a problem, but to double-crossing each other, which is what X-Force is. And this is what's been missing from the X-Men line. Like, yeah, it's not the best comic of all time, but I saw some people, like, complaining about it, and I don't get it. First of all, if you have Chamber in your comic, I'm not going to complain, because I love Chamber, and Chamber is one of Joe Casey's pet characters. Also, I really dig this art from Criss Cross, but like, it's true to their personalities. It's true to what this kind of X-Forcey book would be like, and it has stacks of intriguing plot in it, making them all intersect, including Thunderbird. So like, why would I not like it? This feels like it has the energy and the devotion to X-Men that the rest of this line is completely missing. And to me, that's not a slavish devotion to nostalgia. It's a devotion to using the characters correctly. So now we come to Werewolf by Night. This cover, I've been staring at it for months since it hit the solicits. Wow. Wow. CM Gist, I think, is the artist. I don't know. But this is Red Band, so it's only coming out physically, so I haven't read it, but I love Lilith, major 90s nonsense. So I'm now really excited to catch up on this Jason Liu Werewolf by Night book. I don't read Wonder Woman. This is the first book that I've dropped from the stream for my own mental health. But much like Daredevil, this has gone nowhere for 1.5 years, and supposedly that nowhere is wrapping up this issue or next issue, so we can get into the next set of Nowhere by Tom King. Oh boy, maybe I'll read that first issue of the next arc. Maybe it'll be better. Now we come to X Factor, the newly canceled X Factor. I mean, I had already tried to cancel it, but it is issue number 7 by Mark Russell. And this issue really worked for me. And let me talk about why. Bob Quinn's art, great as always. I think it's been great this whole time. I think the colors from from Jesus Abertov have been great. The letters are really strong. Mark Russell couldn't just go back to the well with this. This had different jokes because Mark Russell hasn't written that much about AI, and this had AI. And he pulled in Forget-Me-Not, which is a great gag character that already exists. So now we have like a gag that he gets to play that's a gag that's rooted in the universe instead of making up gags that don't feel like they fit with X-Men. I didn't love that it made part of the gag Genosha. I think Genosha is so important to X-Men to try to like take it and make it a one-note joke about an AI nation, which I think he just invented from whole cloth in this issue. I think that's pushing it a little bit far. And I think that's, you don't just drop those gags into X-Men continuity, Mark Russell, because then we've got to live with them forever. But because of that, because it was not his usual joke, because he had to work with characters that kind of like had a little bit of a tie into One World Under Doom, although Angel never wears a Doom mask, this is just for the sake of a cover. It worked for me. It was the first time I think that X Factor has completely worked for me, a whole issue front to end. And you heard me say last issue kind of worked for me because it at least had more human moments. So maybe Mark Russell just needed time to warm up. But unfortunately, this book should not have been called X Factor, and it really missed on the beginning. And if you miss on issue 1 and 2, then nobody's going to come back for issue 7 when you finally get the point. Now we come to X-Force. I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in this comic book. Jeffrey Thorne, Colossus was fighting them because he's under control of La Diabla. Every time La Diabla talked, my brain went blank. I get that he's trying to make a strong enemy character, but I've completely lost the thread of what's happening here. It has so many characters I love, but all of them are being used in such weird, blobby, amorphous ways because I don't understand what the stakes are, and I don't understand why this villain keeps monologuing at me. Marcus Toe's art is beyond reproach. I mean, the interior art of this comic is fantastic, colored by Eric Arsenieto, letters by Joe Caramagna. It's great. It looks so good. It could not possibly look better than this, but it's not X-Force. And also, even if it had any other name, Excalibur, X Factor, whatever, it still wouldn't be a good comic book. And that's a shame because, again, I think the thing that's going to result from this is people are going to say, well, nobody wants to buy a Betsy book anymore. But I don't know if that's true. I think if it had been called Excalibur, maybe people would buy it as a Betsy book because then they would have understood what it was. But even if they understood, I think it still would have been a bad comic book. And I didn't read Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is a prologue to the new animated series. And finally, we come to Zatanna. This is art and writing and colors by Jamal Campbell, letters from Ariana Maher. This was a pure delight. Every page of this worked. Every little bit of plot. Zatanna's putting on a magic show, and you're like, oh, is this just going to be about her touring magic show? But no, because it's about how her magic works and her theory of magic, and what happens if somebody else with magic from the past has a different theory of magic and is maybe a little bit more malicious. The colors and the art is so sumptuous. Jamal Campbell is one of the best in the biz right now. And just like, I love that he found action beats to show as they're rehearsing this show, and it made me really fall in love with her crew and the idea of her crew as a supporting cast in this comic. And then as she falls into a series of posters of other people's shows and also movies that have shown at this theater, and she has to keep going into the world of all of them. And just this thread where Jamal Campbell on this page does all of the different movie posters and all the styles of their era, and then he has her dropping into each one of the posters doing her magic backward words. I thought this was pure delight. If you have no idea who Zatanna is, if you already love Zatanna, if you're just looking for an in-continuity DC comic who's going to put a big smile on your face, I think this comic nailed that across the board. If the second issue is as strong, it will be directly into my top 10. And folks, that is the end of the alphabet today. I'm so sorry. I know there's been a lot of lags. I can feel my computer groaning under the weight. I guess I'm gonna have to get a new computer soon, but that's not on the card. So I don't know. Maybe next time I'll make the PDFs smaller. I'll reduce their quality because you're only seeing them so big on the screen right here. Okay. let's get to some quick questions and comments, and then we'll wrap it up. We talked about Hoopla. We talked about the X-Men film. Well, maybe I'll come back to that for a second at the end, Richard. I'm gonna star it. Okay. Ultimate Black Panther, James Abel says, things go bump in the night. What lives inside Vibranium? It was an interesting idea, but it feels like a filler issue. Nick and me eating popcorn while loving the rant. I know I'm not gonna drop so many comments that comics there's no rants. I just feel like maybe there should be a rule, like if I've ranted about the same comics 3 times in a row, I'm not then and it's not getting better, then we need to break. Even if I just take a break from that comic for a month or two, because I don't want the rants to get repetitive. And I feel like if I have to rant multiple times, it starts getting mean-spirited, where I want the rants to be like fun and bright and lively. Lance McNair saying, I'm nearly finished with Silver Age Teen Titans, which has been a charm, but also can be rough, and getting near the Bronze Age. Then that's one of the, people ask me, what runs do you want to make time to read? That is one of the runs that I want to make time to read, and I want to sit down and just do all of it the same way that I did X-Men. And luckily, it doesn't have as many tie-ins, so you can just sit and do it. But I just want the time. And I'm hoping once I'm caught up on everything, which I pretty much am now, once we get through all the near mint condition polls, I think for the back half of the year, I won't be that busy with comic reading and comic stuff. So I'll have more time for guides. And I really do want to read all of Teen Titans. James Abel, Ultimate Wolverine #2, best Wolverine comic right now. Agree. If only Saladin Ahmed knew how to write a Wolverine comic this good. Yeah, unfortunately, also agree on that one. Let's see what else. Ultimate Wolverine is a gorgeous looking book. Colors are so good. James Abel, Uncanny X-Men 10, Nightcrawler had some very good parts. I did not like them. I did also have some problems with the teenagers versus robots battle. It was all over the place. I agree. I couldn't tell what was happening at all. I don't see the point of it to make them heroes. Yeah, I don't get it. Uncanny X-Men 10, I forgot this happened this week till you just pulled it up. I would also love to forget that it happened this week. I would love for continuity to forget that it ever happened at all. Gail Simone achieved the unachievable by getting me to drop Uncanny X-Men. She's a special lady. I take no pleasure in that, though. It's quite sad. I agree. Phenomenally See, unfortunately, feels like Uncanny X-Men is going to get worse. At least I'm not alone. You know, sometimes I get alone on the, like how I don't like Robert Kirkman and everybody's like, how could you not like Invincible? At least I have a few people who are seeing this vision with me on Uncanny X-Men. Let This One Be a Devil. That was the one that I skipped. We'll talk about it next week. Weapon X #1. Not bad. Had a few good parts. Enjoyed some of the Deadpool lines like the one that I read. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Richard Fearing. I hope X-Men can find their form again one day, Krisis. I agree. If I was tasked for regaining the X-Men line, their necessary form, what would you do? I think it comes down to I would go back and look at how X-Men launched after Schism, where there were like 4 or 5 or 6 books on each side of the Schism. You could give the pitch for that book and why the cast was in that book in one line, right? Like Uncanny X-Force, proactive murder squad to protect the Jean Grey school. Done. X-Factor. X-Factor investigations is more a team than a family. Done. You need, if you're going to proliferate X-Men comics, then you can go do this in the 90s. Any good era of X-Men where like the whole line was pretty strong, you usually can go in and you can with a sentence say what the book is. And then when you say the team members in that book, most of them will make perfect sense. Not all of them should make perfect sense because there should always be surprises. But that to me is a key to the good X-Men line. And I thought that Tom Brevoort of all people would be able to do that. But this whole X-Men line, it feels so mix and match that not only is there like a no good overarching thread in the line, but on an issue book by book basis, it doesn't feel like you can get to that simplicity of summarizing the book and saying, why is this book and why is the cast this cast? And I think X-Men fans are seen as this deep well of bottomless pockets usually. And so people are like, whatever, it's X-Men, they'll buy it. We'll have like 20 issues to figure it out. And I think we're learning that in the current comics climate right now, people do not have unlimited money or patience. Oh, did this battery run out? They don't have unlimited money and patience. And as a result, like we're finding out that, you know, they're not going to stick with these books. It's unheard of for X-Force to get canceled after 10 issues. X-Force got canceled after 10 issues going into Hickman, but they knew that it was going to end after 10. And Cy Sperrier had a pretty short X-Force in 2014, but that ended partially because we were going into Secret Wars. For X-Force to only make it 10 issues, that is the sign that something is very, very wrong. Nick N only thought Weapon X-Men was okay, but the cast was great. Max Appelman said it was super fun. I thought it was really rad. Got the voices and dynamic down well. Loved it. Plus, what a cast. I agree. Like, I just want to have fun. Girls and also Krisis just wants to have fun. Anyway, James Abel chiming in for me on Wonder Woman 18. The plot is finally moving, but what Wonder Woman is doing, I can see it's dividing the fan base. Wonder Woman versus the White House. Nick N, I need to read that Werewolf by Night. That Lilith cover, it's really one of the best covers I've seen this year so far. James Abel X Factor 7. Not even a Doctor Doom crossover can save this horrible run. Says Murph, I only picked up X Factor because of the cover. I've not been picking up any issues prior to this. And now that I know it's being canceled, I'm not going to start. And plus, it worked as a good standalone issue anyway. So more power to you. X-Force number 8. Here come Forge, the Iron Man 2.0 to the rescue. Yeah, just what is it even about? I can't even tell. Even more shocking since Gail Simone seems tailor-made for an X-Men book. I would not say that, but my complex feelings on Gail Simone will be for some other stream. Zatanna number 1. Beautiful artwork, but mixed feelings in the plot. Needed a few more issues to see. Yeah, and now that, for the first month of January, everything's new. Like even if a book is on issue 80, it's the first issue of that year. So in January, I'm really willing to let lots of books kind of creep into my top 10 out of nowhere. Now that we're getting close to March, now you're going to need 2 issues to get into my top 10. And then starting in like April, May, you're going to need 3, which is my typical. Junkmaster B is leaving a party after probably burning down the dance floor. How's Peter still going after I'm throwing in the towel? What a marathoner. I'm really feeling it today. The new Spider-Man cartoon is solid. I've been hearing people saying interesting things about it. Richard Fearing saying, enjoying friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Excited to see what they do for season 2. Lance McNair's Zatanna is one of the coolest, most underutilized characters out there. Another book I'll have to read. It was really good. Hank, haven't read it yet, waiting for trade, but it was exciting for Simone writing Rogue. Unfortunate to hear it's not new. I was excited to hear her write Rogue too. And at first I liked it because the voice felt really specific to me, but as time has pressed on, I also don't like how she's writing Rogue, and I'm a pretty big Rogue fan. If you love Rogue, you got to be reading that Rogue Savage Land throwback miniseries by Tim Seeley. I think everyone in the whole stream liked the issue number 1, which hardly ever happens. I love this even more than Bringing Down the House. Oh, maybe that's another Zatanna book. Okay, I got there. Richard Fearing, I did recently read some of the Secret Six omnibus by Gail Simone. The way she wrote that, I would have thought maybe she could tackle X-Men, but everybody has their ups and downs. That's a very even-handed, level-headed version of saying that. Which of this week's comics are you most excited for? I don't know. I'm not through all of my posts yet on CK, so I don't know yet, Max. You're asking me to do even more homework than I'm already doing. Richard Fearing, what are your thoughts on X-Men by Jerry Dugan omnibus that Omar recently announced? It's not a good read. But the X-Men flagship through all of Krakoa was best when it was paired with the things that were happening contemporaneous to it. Dugan's X-Men is not satisfying at all, even with the Hellfire Gala stuff thrown in. If you're not also reading Immortal and X-Men Red, it's such a strange decision for me, especially because Dugan's not a huge name. I know they just want to put out an X-Men book that will sell, but it's not satisfying. Like, why put out a book that's not satisfying? I don't know. Double Down Slot saying it's time for my jam, and Rogue is Lance's favorite, so we'll read that Savage Land issue ASAP. And Richard Fearing, another wonderful stream from me, thanking me for my time and my knowledge. I want to come back, Richard, to your other comment. Look, I'm not a film person, and I also have very different tastes than your average movie fan and X-Men fan. So me saying what I would do, it's like pointless. Like I don't know what would make people happy. I think I'm a deeply weird person, but at the same time, I think when you're a deeply weird person, you have a point of view, and I think that's why Stranger Things works, right? Because the Duffer Brothers are deeply weird people, and they have a point of view, and that's why Stranger Things is so interesting. Not just because the story is good, but because they're weird and they have a point of view, and the point of view is intriguing to watch. So I don't know that I can make an X-Men pitch that will sound perfect and entertaining to you all just from the me pitching on the stream perspective. What I think would be interesting is if I actually got to make something like that, because then it wouldn't be just be a pitch, it would be my weird execution. So like, could I pitch how it would put together on screen? I think you can't just start with a school, but you have to start with characters who are young and don't fully understand who they are or their powers. And I think school lends itself to that. But I think it would be nice if we started out in a world where they've already witnessed superpowered things happening in the world, because the MCU world has that. And from there, they try to find themselves, which I don't really think we've seen anyone do in the MCU yet. I think an X-Men film should be a film about identity. It should feel like Stranger Things. I think the Duffer Brothers are the people that should direct it. We have them. They exist. Everybody knows they love X-Men. Nancy Wheeler is based on Kitty Pryde. Get them for X-Men. They will do exactly the right thing. But yeah, I think an X-Men movie should be in a world that's already superpowered. It should be about characters who are not kids, but are young enough to not fully understand what they want to do with their powers. And I think it should have a vibe like Stranger Things. And I think that could really work. So look, I'm going to play a song which has been in my mind all weekend, but I have not rehearsed it all. So I want to say thank you so much for being on the stream. This was a long one, and I was worried about the plumbing and my computer was slowing down. So I'm feeling very self-conscious that maybe it wasn't that interesting. So I really hope that it was interesting. The fact that so many of you stuck around tells me I was doing something right. So I really, really appreciate that, even if you didn't comment. I will be back next week. Later this week, I will be on Near Mint Condition on Thursday to talk about evergreen Daredevil stories. See, I almost said Deadpool instead of Daredevil. So look forward to that. Check out Crushing Krisis. If you have any questions about reading orders or where to get your Marvel comics or what order they go in or what issues in which trade. If you're really enjoying this, I would love it if you have the time and the money to chip in $1 or $2 a month on Patreon to get access to every single guide. That would be really cool. And otherwise, I will see you next week. This song, I don't want to go into too long of a diatribe now, but it has a comic book connection. When I was writing songs a lot, like all the time for my band, I was very muscular in songwriting, and I could sometimes just have a little idea about a song and know exactly how it would go even before I got to a guitar or piano. And this one actually came to me in a dream. And in the dream, Madonna sang it to me. And in the dream, she said, "This is a cover." And then she played the song in full in the dream. And I woke up and picked up my guitar, and the song was what she played. Like I dreamt the right chords for the song in the dream, which is something I used to do all the time. But it has a comic book connection because I just watched the cartoon of New Frontier, Justice League New Frontier. And even though this is not all ostensibly about New Frontier, I realized as I worked out what all the lyrics were and kind of filled in the gaps from the dream, that it was a song about that big, creepy, bad guy at the center of New Frontier. So I'm not saying this is a song about a comic. I'm not trying to say it's a gimmick. I just know that in my mind and in the writing of it, this song is a song by somebody Madonna was covering in my dream. And it's actually about New Frontier. For a long time, I thought it was by REM because it has a certain REM sound to it. But I have all of REM's songs, and I'm pretty sure it's not. So this is called Message. Thank you for sticking around, and I have been Krisis. This is how I found you, in need of a better answer, struggling to pull away from the force of gravity. Your tongue was sounding out the shape of your solution, but you cannot make it out. The center cannot hold you down if you get your message out. And if you forget how, I will be your typewriter. Tell me how you feel. Press into me with all your might, and I will reveal. Right now you need winding down before you go spinning out of control. You still need straightening out. If you're gonna get anywhere from here, it's not enough to survive, it's not enough to settle. You wanna feel alive. Test your metal. The center can't hold you down if you get your message out. So if you forget how, I will be your typewriter. Show me how you feel. Press into me with all your might, and I will reveal. I will be your transmitter. Tell me how you feel. Press into me with all your might, and I will reveal. A universe of sound, a universe of light, a universe of sound. So will you stay? Will you stay? to me, pressing me with all your might. I will be your ray of light. I will be your typewriter. I will be your transmitter. I will be what you need tonight. I will get your message right. I will be your ray of light. I will be what you need tonight. That was Message, not written by Madonna, written by Krisis. This has been Crushing Krisis. Poll is live! Thank you so much for attending, contributing, listening, and engaging. Like, subscribe, do all the things, but most importantly, be kind to yourself and be kind to others in the world, and I will see you next week. It doesn't seem to be ending. Why is it not ending?